Hi, subscribe to Revenge Tale not to miss new stories. On Thursday, Bob sat down at the table and looked at his bottle of Miller Lite. He decided to limit himself to just 6, fearing that if something went wrong, he might get drunk. When the music stopped above, he realized that his wife had almost finished her preparations. Bob usually worked late on Thursdays because of his wife's hen parties with friends. His parents were picking up their daughter, Casey, and his wife was enjoying drinks with colleagues. He stayed late, eliminating paperwork so he could leave early on Friday and spend time with his family. Everything seemed carefully planned. He freed up time in his busy schedule. His parents adored their granddaughter, and his wife enjoyed personal time with friends. At least, that's what he thought. The sound of his wife climbing the stairs reminded him of his meeting with Vicky last week. He thought about the need to go to the store more often or find out about the delivery of these amazing sandwiches. Sitting down to watch the door, he soon noticed a familiar figure entering the restaurant. Watching her look around the room, Bob stood up and waved at her. She saw him and walked towards him. Vicky was the eldest of the girls his wife dated. Bob had tender feelings for her and noticed that she was the only one of them married. She had a talent for calming tension without becoming permissive. He had to admit that her dark, wavy hair and fair skin made her very attractive. Vicky looked very attractive. Although she did not have abundant breasts, she had a stunning face and beautiful legs. Her husband, Ron, considered her a gift of fate, and she also felt the same way about him. When she sat down across from him, she thanked Bob for the meeting. "I know how busy you are, Bob. I appreciate your time," she said, fixing him with an intense gaze. "No problem, Vicky," Bob replied. "Though I'm a little uncomfortable meeting you without Sharon. I prefer to have lunch with my wife, but as far as Sharon is concerned, I always listen carefully. I assume that you are preparing a surprise for her birthday next month." Bob didn't expect to see the sadness in Vicky's eyes at the mention of their lunch or Sharon's birthday. "What's wrong, Bob? I know that you and Sharon love each other very much. I've seen enough to understand your connection. That's why I'm here. It can strain our relationship, but if it helps save your marriage, I'm ready to give everything," Vicky said. Bob was stunned. "It's supposed to be a joke." "A terrible joke." Bob expressed his displeasure. "I'm sorry, Bob, but this is not a joke. About 2 months ago, after you took on this project, Sharon became depressed. She was irritable at work, and when we go out, she seems even more boring than usual. After a few martinis, we managed to get her to open up and tell us that she misses you and that she feels neglected. She also mentioned that they are just an average married couple who are missing out on life," Vicky revealed. It was at this moment that the waiter came over to take Vicky's order. She chose Cobb chicken salad and lemon ice cream tea. Bob's mind was still seething with thoughts that his wife was hiding something from him. During their 8 years together, Bob was sure that his wife would trust him if she was unhappy. He believed that they were always outspoken in expressing their feelings, even if they disagreed. He turned to Vicky and urgently whispered, "Did she sleep with him?" "No, at least not as far as I know. And based on how I know her, your wife is usually quite open. That's why I'm surprised by her behavior. Bob, there's one thing you should know. All the women I've talked to say the same thing. I imagine that both of you often complain about being overwhelmed by your daily life. When Sharon mentioned it, we all sympathized with her and said that she was a beautiful woman and you should pay more attention to her. Unfortunately, my sister was there that night. What does my sister have to do with this?" Bob asked, managing to suppress some anger. "To be honest, my sister is very free-thinking," Vicky replied. The waiter who brought her tea raised an eyebrow at her remark. Vicky took a sip and continued, "My parents both cheated on each other. I do not know which of them cheated first, but they always wanted revenge on each other. When I was 17, I asked them why they were still together, and they acted like I was from another planet. They said they love each other, and that's all that matters. It affected me and my sister in different ways. I understand that cheating destroys relationships, But my sister thought it was okay if you loved each other. I love her, but she is deluded in a special way. Anyway, let's get back to our topic. My sister Gary suggested that if you don't find romance in the house, then you should look for it elsewhere. I told her she was wrong, but then Hannah and Gail started discussing finding the best partners and keeping everything a secret. I think it was just an academic interest for them, especially considering that they are not married. Sharon said she would never cheat on you, but I think my sister's words sowed doubt in her mind. Why do you think that? Bob asked, now doubting Sharon's loyalty. He began to process more information. It wasn't easy to hear all this, but Bob always believed that knowledge is power. The following week, they were joined by Luke Jonas' team at the Red Horse Bar. Sharon claims she didn't invite him, but mentioned our dance plans. It's usually fun when more people try something new, but not with Luke. Now that he has a name, Bob has recognized that knowledge is power. Tell me about that guy, Luke, Bob demanded. Vicky noticed Bob's determined tone with a faint smile and continued, Luke Jonas is notorious for running after women. He pursues every woman, showing interest in anyone who becomes a victim of his charm. He doesn't care if she's married or not, or especially attractive. He's just enjoying the hunt. Your wife attracted his attention from the very beginning, but he didn't pursue her until that night. Now he's after her, and instead of confronting him, she's avoiding him. Everyone knows that if Luke is faced with a new charge of seduction, he will be fired. She could have stopped his progress, but she didn't. They have often been seen hanging out in the dining room for several months. I tried to discuss it with her, but she defended herself and insisted that they were just friends and that Luke was listening to her and understood her problems. I asked her if she would behave the same way if you were around, and she blushed, admitting that she didn't. Then she got upset by mentioning something about you not noticing her. After that, I stepped back and watched her. They seemed to have calmed down at work, and I thought everything was back to normal until this incident happened 3 weeks ago. When Vicky received her order and began to eat, Bob, watching his reaction, drank lemonade. His thoughts were elsewhere. He wondered how she could have thought that he would be upset by her flirting with another man. He knew he wasn't too jealous, just because he loved and trusted his wife. As for not noticing her, he wondered if he had become too involved in his work project. His interest in the incident 3 weeks ago did not leave him. Did he really want to know? They ate in silence for the next 5 minutes while Bob processed Vicky's revelations. Undoubtedly, he was angry. She had no excuse for being so intimate with another man. However, he could understand her logic. If he had been more attentive, perhaps none of this would have happened. And by not telling him about her flirtation, she was actually lying to him. Of course, this was a default lie. But for now, he could forgive her actions and focus on fixing the situation. He will talk to her and share his concerns. If she was honest and agreed to distance herself from Luke, they could move forward. So far, he has not seen any significant damage, unless, of course, something significant has happened in the last 3 weeks. Tell me what happened 3 weeks ago. How serious was it? He asked. With this question, he felt a solid, unbreakable foundation under him. He felt he could handle it. Vicky looked at him sympathetically. This is where the trouble starts, Bob. 3 weeks ago, we found ourselves back at the Red Horse Bar for dancing. Luke and his friends came, and we all danced together, having a good time. Sharon drank more than usual, and Luke ordered her drinks throughout the evening, which made her very drunk. I accompanied her to the bathroom and realized that she was even more intoxicated than I initially thought. When she left, she held her underwear in her hand, explaining that she wanted to feel free. Okay, she was almost drunk. I attributed her behavior to alcohol and took her back to our table. I tried to convince Hannah and Gail to help me take Sharon to my house so she wouldn't come home too drunk. However, I noticed how Sharon and Luke got too close to each other, clashing and imitating acts of copulation on the dance floor. After dancing in the group, the rest of the evening seemed like background noise. I saw Sharon put her underwear in Luke's pocket at the end of the song. Unfortunately, everyone else in the bar saw it. The harps were reverberating all over the bar when Luke kissed her, smiling broadly. One of his friends filmed what was happening on his mobile phone. I hoped Sharon was resisting, but she went for it. When she noticed Bob's reaction, she apologized, saying she was sorry. His jaw seemed to drop, and he had to leave. He stuttered, stood and left, locking himself in the toilet, apologizing for just a moment. When he doused his face with water and gripped the sink tightly, he remembered the night Sharon returned home late, at 2:30 a.m., after Vicky called, where she said they would stay together because of excessive alcohol consumption. This has happened several times already, and Bob is grateful to the girls for taking care of Sharon and preventing a possible arrest for drunk driving. He remembered their passionate sex that night, sensing something unusual in her behavior. Returning to the present, he was overcome with anger, feeling betrayed by her arousal in front of another man and ready for a confrontation upon returning home. Dan, he thought, what if she was thinking about him when we were together? When he came to his senses, he returned to the table and noticed the compassion on Vicky's face, but did not know how to react to it. His sandwich remained untouched when he asked Vicky for more information. Honestly, Bob, that's all it is. There were several bachelorette parties at Hannah's house, with wine and underwear shows at work. Sharon seems far away from Luke, although he still pursues her. I thought it was over, but yesterday I saw them talking. They stopped talking when I came over, so I didn't know what was going on. I think you should have known since she doesn't listen to her friends anymore, Vicky explained. Before the waiter brought the bill, Bob quickly grabbed it and searched for his credit card. I would like to observe their interaction and maybe scare them right after the start, he suggested. Sharon suggested that you and the girls are going to the Red Horse Bar this week, so this Thursday when you go there, I'll show up and watch them from the sidelines. He stopped abruptly, noticing Vicky's startled look. What did I say wrong? Hannah has a doctor's appointment Friday morning, and Gail is going to visit her brother in Florida. If Sharon goes out on Thursday, she won't be with us, Vicky explained, reaching across the table to take mine. I'm sorry, darling, I'm so sorry. She expressed her sadness. I know I shouldn't ask if you're okay, but here's my home phone number. Call me anytime to talk to Ron or me. Her husband was a family counselor, so talking to him could be helpful. Thanks for warning me, Vicky. I understand that this is not easy for you, but I really believe that you are a good person and a good friend. I am not sure what lies ahead, but I am aware of the present circumstances and I can take some measures. Thanks again. Bob expressed his gratitude, got up from the table, paid the bill with a credit card, and left on Wednesday. Today was a breakthrough in a project that Bob was involved in. They were able to provide themselves with ready-made parts from a startup company in Harrisburg, reducing the setup time by 2 months, providing a week's supply, despite the unstable logistics of transportation. 2 more phone calls, and this plan will be completed 2 months ahead of schedule, saving millions for the Army. The award will also be significant, as Bob expected, and the recognition of the project will significantly enhance his reputation. He should have been happy to the point of insanity, but he reflected on how afraid he was to go home and face what he felt he had to deal with. He decided to investigate the matter himself. Although he did not have access to her work email, he doubted that they were communicating through her, given HR control. He logged into her Yahoo Mail, but found nothing incriminating. However, she might have a separate email account that he didn't know about until he got access to their home computer. Bob admitted his technological ineptitude, realizing that buying a video surveillance system or installing voice microphones sounded attractive at first glance, but he already had a plan B. He simply intended to gather as much information as possible to assess the degree of effort needed to preserve or end his marriage. Sharon had already taken their daughter Casey away from her parents and forced him to deliver Chinese food. When he asked what she wanted, she replied that after 10 years together and 8 of them married, he should understand that she loves him. He couldn't help but respond sarcastically, mentioning that he just wanted to make sure she was still happy with the assignment. His phone rang right after that. She then asked for an extra dish, mentioning shakto. If it hadn't been for yesterday's shock, he would have been thrilled to come home an hour earlier and spend time with his wife and child. However, when he looked at his watch, he realized that before the start of the project, this hour would have been 2 hours later. He also realized that he had not been home with his family so early on Friday since the start of the project. In addition to being tired and stressed, it was clear that Sharon felt neglected, but that didn't excuse her actions. When he walked through the front door, he saw his wife reaching for a bottle of wine. He paused for a moment, admiring her figure. At 31 years old, she represented the epitome of womanhood. Despite being only 5 feet tall, her curves were undeniably alluring. Even in loose sweatpants, her shapely rear was evident. With her hair pulled back in a ponytail, she turned around, flashing him a bright smile, making him realize how incredibly lucky he was to have her. But then reality hit him. "I'm so happy you're home, honey. How was work?" She greeted him, planting a kiss on his lips. "Good. We made a major breakthrough on some supplies, so we might finish the project at least a month ahead of schedule," he replied. "Sweetheart, I know I've been away from home a lot because of this project. It's frustrating that I can't share the details because they're classified. But I want you to know that you and Casey are my top priority, and I'll do everything to keep us safe," he reassured her, looking into her eyes. Did he sense a hint of regret or guilt? Or was he just imagining things? It was one of those moments when he cursed his inability to read people. He was often considered straightforward, preferring direct communication and expecting the same from others. While he knew his approach might come across as blunt, people appreciated his honesty and no-nonsense attitude. This method had served him well for 34 years, and he saw no reason to change it until now. "Ah, darling," she responded. "We both love you and understand. I do wish you were around more, but I know it's temporary. Still, I appreciate that you acknowledge it." She seemed on the verge of tears. Was she genuinely emotional or just a skilled actress? "So, what does the early completion of the project mean for you?" she asked, unpacking food containers from her bag. "Well, firstly, it means a substantial bonus to my salary. The exact amount won't be known until the project is approved, but it's significant, and successfully completing our first government project should attract more work to the company. As the project leader, there may be lucrative opportunities with government contractors seeking my expertise. The higher-ups are aware of this, so I might negotiate some additional perks. If all goes well, it should be quite rewarding," he explained, attempting to eat his sweet and sour pork with chopsticks before eventually picking up a fork. "Didn't I mention this before?" he asked between bites. "Not that I recall, darling," she replied. "All I remember is you mentioning a significant contract you couldn't discuss, but it sounded promising. And since then, it feels like we haven't had much conversation," she remarked, appearing a bit downcast before perking up. "But it looks like my husband will be back soon," she added with a brighter tone. He glanced at her. "Time to go fishing. So, which bar are you and the ladies heading to tomorrow night? Should I stop by after work to make sure you're all okay to drive home?" he asked nonchalantly. "Oh, actually, we decided to go to the Red Horse Bar for some group dancing, but I think we'll be done before you finish work," she replied, her gaze shifting to her orange chicken. His heart sank. At that moment, Casey finished her egg roll and requested bedtime stories. He cleared his plate and rinsed it in the sink before lifting his daughter and carrying her into the living room. For the next hour, he indulged his child by reading one story after another until she drifted off to sleep. A soft snore emanated from the sofa where he saw his wife curled up, her book abandoned in her lap. Picking up his daughter, he climbed the stairs to her bedroom, gently placing her in bed and tucking her in tightly beneath the covers. As he pondered the coming day, tears welled up in his eyes. He wished for his daughter to remember these pleasant evenings with her parents instead of the impending hardships. Wiping away his tears, he descended the stairs to where his wife lay asleep on the sofa. He gave her a tender kiss on the lips and pulled the blanket over her to shield her from the cold. Then he set out to find her phone, discovering it plugged into a wall socket on the nightstand in their bedroom. Unlocking it with a swipe, he began scrolling through her text messages. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Scrolling back, he traced their conversations from the past 3 months. Him: "Hey, beautiful. It was fun watching you and the girls dance last night." Her: "Likewise. Bob works late on Thursdays and the in-laws watch Casey, so we had a girls' night." Him: "Your husband seems like a good guy, letting you have some fun." Her: "Yes, he's amazing." For the next few weeks, the messages remained innocuous until this particular exchange took place. She: "Today, Vicky reprimanded me because of our lunch breaks. I was annoyed, but she understood everything." He is: "Exactly. I don't want any misunderstandings." She asked if Bob would approve of our behavior, which made me think that we might be giving the wrong signals. Besides, I shouldn't reveal all my problems in front of another guy. I'll try to talk to Bob. He: "I understand. But if you can't get his attention, you know where to find me. I'll even buy you dinner if necessary, just as friends." Bob couldn't remember her trying to discuss anything with him, but it could have happened when he discovered the need for food-grade stainless steel for the project. He devoted several days to finding a supplier capable of meeting the required quantity. During this period, even if a bomb had fallen on him, he could have remained unsuspecting. Still, looking through her messages, everything seemed harmless at first glance. He felt that the fool was obviously aiming for her. How could she not see it? Scrolling down, he found a new batch of messages. She: "You have to return them today." He: "What are you talking about?" She: "You know perfectly well that my friends are furious right now, and I don't blame them for that. If Bob finds out that I've been acting like some kind of frivolous woman, he can leave me. So don't you want me to show him the video?" She: "What kind of video? No one at work should see this." Sam was there and took a video on his phone. "I'll convince him to delete it, but you owe me." She: "Okay, I can't lose Bob, especially after last night." He: "What happened last night?" She: "It really doesn't concern anyone." He: "Was it annoying that you came home late and drunk?" She: "Very funny." Hell, no. Let's say that something happened that turned everything upside down, and let's leave it that way. So dancing with me made you work hard to forgive your husband. He should be grateful to me. She: "You're disgusting. Last night was unforgettable, and that's because Bob and I love each other. Now give me back my underpants and make sure that Dan video is erased." She: "Damn it. It sounded like I was some kind of slutty woman. Bob deserves better than me." "No, he's lucky to have you. He was looking out for you, wasn't he? I'm sure he's a great guy, but you often go out alone." She: "I don't need anyone to look out for me. Just be the friend you call yourself and do what I ask you to do. You are welcome." Him: "I'm sorry. Of course I'll help you, and then you can buy me dinner." She: "Just make sure no one sees this video, and I'll do whatever you want. Until last Monday." He: "I heard the bachelorette party was canceled. How about having dinner with me?" She: "Not a good idea. Sorry." Him: "Come on. Your husband will be at work, and the girls left you alone with a friend in the evening, and we can talk like we used to in the cafeteria. Besides, you owe me." She: "Okay, I'll meet you at the Red Horse at 8. He: "No, I'll meet you at TGI Fridays, which is located at the Sheraton Hotel. There are great drinks there, and I don't want to be bothered by drunken idiots. If we drink too much, I'll rent a room." She: "Okay, but it's just a dinner with a few friends, and I'm grateful to you that the video never got out. It's enough that people at work have heard about it." He: Don't worry about it. I saw Sam delete the video, and soon someone else will do something scandalous. And you'll be fine. See you at 8. It was at this point that he realized that this was probably the end of his marriage. How many times has he seen his wife going on a date with another man in a hotel restaurant? How can it end well? How can she think that there is no intimacy here? Closing the messages, he plugged his phone into the charger, undressed, and climbed into bed alone. I couldn't sleep for a long time. On Thursday, she came down the stairs wearing the little black dress she always wore when they went out together. She looked amazing. When she stopped at the bottom of the stairs, she saw him sitting at a table. "I didn't expect you to come home so early, darling," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk, Sharon," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is probably the most important conversation we've ever had. Please sit down." She sat down, looking anxious, and, as usual, reached out to take his hand. But he refused her this. "I know there won't be a bachelorette party today. I know you're dating Luke Jonas." Behind my back, he began. "Bob, please let me explain." But he abruptly interrupted her by slamming his fist on the table. "Damn it, Sharon, listen to me," he shouted. "You can't talk until I say my word." She jerked away, tears filling her eyes. He regarded her indifferently and continued. "Like I said, I know you kissed that fool at lunch. I know you danced with him at the Red Horse Bar. I know that you took off your panties and gave them to him after provocative moves on the dance floor. I know you were hung up on me 3 weeks ago just because you were turned on by him. I also know that tonight you're going on a date with him at a hotel restaurant where your boyfriend has already booked a table. I just don't know if you've slept with him yet, and I don't know what can stop you if you haven't." He paused, trying to contain his anger. "Sharon, you lied to me by not telling me about Luke. You lied to me about your seductive dance, and you lied to me about going out with girls. To be honest, I'm exhausted, and my trust in you is destroyed. I'm not even sure if I want to save this marriage, because your actions say that you are no longer interested in it. That's why I'm offering you 3 options." He held up a finger. "Option 1. You leave through this door and go to your idiot boyfriend, even if you don't sleep together tonight. This choice will completely destroy our marriage. I won't want to keep it." He held up his other finger. "Option 2. We've been sitting here all night, and you're trying to convince me to save our marriage. It will be extremely difficult for you to convince me, since I am not inclined to believe a single word from your mouth. But maybe you can do it, because I really love you, and we need to think about our child. I can say that there is a 50% chance that I will agree to try." He held up a third finger. "Option 3. You're taking me with you tonight, so I can meet your lover. You demand that he never speak or contact you again. Then you let us talk to him alone for at least 15 minutes until we can hear each other. This option will bring you the most respect and maximize my willingness to work with you. If you haven't slept with him or engaged in any love activity, I promise to be 100% committed to working on the relationship. However, if you did, that's the only option that could potentially save our marriage." She seemed on the verge of vomiting, staring at him in horror. "Option 1, 2, or 3, Sharon. Which one will you choose?" The question was in the air for almost a minute. She restrained herself from crying while looking at me. "Bob, I'm so sorry about everything, and I desperately need to talk to you. In answer to your question, who will lead, you or me? Well, it was unexpected. I really didn't expect her to choose to meet her lover. I thought it was almost certain that she would be sitting here all night trying to justify her behavior. Agreeing to arrange a meeting with her idiot gave her some points, but she was still in deep red. I took the keys and followed her to the car. Out of habit, I opened the door for her, and she almost burst into tears when I pulled out onto the road. She looked at me. "I really ruined everything for us, didn't I?" she asked softly. "Yes, Sharon, you really did it," I replied, not taking my eyes off the road. "What can I do to fix this?" she asked. I thought for a moment. I had a couple of options in my head. "Well, first of all, Complete honesty from now on. I shouldn't even have to say this, but apparently you find it acceptable to withhold important things or lie to me repeatedly. Besides, you need to find a way to make me believe what you're saying. I'm not sure how you're going to do this, but to be honest, it wasn't me who broke our trust. One more thing that I didn't think it necessary to mention, but I'll say it anyway. He's dead to you. If we're together, you won't talk to him at work. You won't be interested in his affairs. If he shows up at the bar where you are, you leave. If you can't leave, call me right away. You don't accept drinks or gifts from him. No matter what he says, you stop all communication with him. Besides, when we get back tonight, you're going to tell me everything. I don't need to listen to your thoughts. I understand that I was absorbed in this project, so I bear some responsibility in this. If you have any resentment towards me, let me know. And the last thing for now, plan a joint marriage consultation. If you prefer to choose an advisor yourself, you can do it. Maybe Ron can recommend someone. When I finished speaking, her phone made the sound of a text message. She looked down and turned even paler. He's the one asking where I am, she whispered softly. I held out my hand and she handed me the phone. Wordlessly, I scrolled through her messages. There were a few from him from today. Hi, I've booked a room with a jacuzzi. Maybe we can relax after lunch. Bring a swimsuit with you. You can't get me drunk enough to take a hot bath with you. I'm not bringing a swimsuit. Let's see. You know what happens when you drink. Maybe you won't need a swimsuit. And just now from him. Where are you? While waiting for you, I had a glass of wine. I replied, I'm running a little late. I have a surprise for you. Him. Oh, you brought your bikini. Perfect. I returned the phone to my wife. She read the messages and simply hung her head. You know these messages don't help your case, right? Just the ones from today make it seem like you're planning to hook up with him tonight. How much worse will it look if I scroll further? I asked, knowing full well how damning it would appear. I suppose I should ask. I began. Do you consider your text messages today as inappropriate flirting? Can you grasp how these exchanges have shattered all my trust in you? I heard her sobbing. Bob, I swear, I only intended to have dinner tonight. I never planned to sleep with him. I couldn't help but regard her as if she were foolish. Were you intending to give him your underwear after taking them off, like you did a few weeks ago? I didn't think she could grow any paler, but I was proven wrong. Sharon, we're almost there. You might want to fix your makeup and think about what you're going to say to Luke. Oh, and avoid drinking wine. She pulled down the visor and retrieved a napkin from the glove compartment. As she began to compose herself and stopped crying, she started applying mascara. In a more composed tone, she asked, Bob, I understand why you think Luke was toying with me. Listening to you talk about it, I think it's true. But Bob, how could I have not seen this? I know my recent decisions don't reflect it. But I'm not a naive little girl. I've fended off more attractive and sophisticated men than Luke. So why did he target me? This is one of the reasons why I find it hard to believe what you say now. Sharon, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman who should see through this nonsense. That's why I have to wonder. Did you go along with it willingly? I responded, Ugh. Imagine if I picked up some woman at a bar with this guy and lied to you that I was going to dinner with her tonight. No wonder you're so angry and hurt. Her color seemed to be returning and her voice grew slightly firmer. Okay, I messed up and now I have to find a way to fix it. Thank you for giving me a chance. She leaned in to kiss me, but at the last moment I turned my head, allowing her to peck me on the cheek. I'm not over this, not in the long run, I said. She looked at me, almost shocked. We usually show a lot of affection. Hopefully, we can get back to that. What should I tell him? She asked as we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. Finding a spot, I turned off the engine and let my anger simmer. What do I want you to tell him? Sharon, our relationship is barely hanging on because of your actions with that idiot. You two have shattered the core of our marriage. Our daughter could spend Thanksgiving with you and Christmas with me. I want to make this clear, so tell him whatever you want." She sat quietly for a moment, then sighed and opened the car door. As we approached the restaurant in the hotel, she took a step as if reaching for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't welcome her touch either. We entered, and a pretty red-haired girl stood behind the small kiosk, asking if we were a party of two. Before I could respond, my wife interjected, stating that we were meeting someone there who was already present. The head waitress acknowledged her statement and suggested we take a look around. Not knowing what the person looked like, I relied on my wife to guide us. She lightly nudged me with her elbow and gestured towards the back of the restaurant, where a man sat near the hotel door, seemingly engrossed in his phone. With determined steps, she walked towards the table and stopped without bothering to sit down. The man looked up, spotted her, and flashed a wide smile. It took him a moment to realize there was a man behind her. When he noticed me, his smile vanished, and his eyes narrowed slightly. "Luke, this is my husband, Robert Morgan. He's concerned about our relationship, and after talking with him, I have to agree. For the first time in our marriage, I've given him reason to doubt my fidelity. I'll work hard to repair the breach of trust caused by my relationship with you. From now on, I want nothing to do with you. There's no reason for you to call, text, or otherwise communicate with me. I accept responsibility for getting our relationship to this point. Now, I've chosen to end it. My husband is aware of my regrettable actions at the Red Horse Bar. I'll do everything I can to salvage my relationship with him, including informing HR of the entire situation. Tomorrow, I'll let them know that any attempt to engage me in non-work-related conversation will be unwelcome. Now, I'll sit at the bar while my husband talks to you." As she turned away, she kissed me before I could react. She looked into my eyes for a moment and whispered, "I'm truly sorry." I couldn't help but glance at her as she approached the bar. It turned out to be even better than I expected. Collapsing in a chair opposite the embarrassed robber, I couldn't resist an exploratory glance. Dark hair, slim build, impeccably dressed. He could be called attractive, but I've never been good at judging men. He was probably about my height, although it was hard to tell from a sitting position. I couldn't help but notice how his gaze lingered on the glass of wine on the table opposite him. That almost confirmed my suspicions. It's time to keep calm. I had a rough idea of what I wanted, but I had to figure it out along the way. Quick reaction is not my strong suit. "So you thought it would be a surprise to see her in a bikini?" I asked with a half smile. "Do you really believe she told you everything?" He replied with a grin. Now that this fool was in front of me, I felt confident. I can handle this problem. Actually, yes. I've known this woman for 10 years, and I've been married to her for 8. I think I understand her better than some nice guy who's been stalking her for 3 months. I maintained a smile. The waiter came over and asked me what I wanted to drink. I ordered a Johnny Walker Black Double with ice. "She really knows how to please a man," he remarked, still trying to smile. He looked at the glass of wine he had already ordered for her. "Yes, this time it is." I smiled broadly. "But I don't think you're saying this from experience. Do you need photos?" He joked, laughing. This guy was trying to piss me off. I wanted to reach across the table, but instead I laughed. "You don't have any photos. If she'd done this to you, you wouldn't have had to put something in her drink. What do pseudo-criminals use these days? With gamma-hydroxybutyrate, rohypnol, or good old ecstasy?" It was a guess, but his shocked expression dispelled all doubts. He twitched as I leaned across the table towards him. Now I was really furious. "You're a nasty coward. Honestly, I could beat you up right here and now, but I don't want to end up in jail at this moment. I gave my wife 3 options, and now I'm going to give you 3 options." I poked his finger under his nose. "First of all, you're leaving. Right now, you're leaving and apologizing to my wife. And you're leaving work tomorrow. I promise not to harass you. Then you'll have to leave the city." I held up another finger. "Secondly, You go to the police and admit that you put medicine in my wife's drink. You're serving your sentence and staying away from my wife. I'll keep an eye on you, but I won't chase you. Then you'll have to leave the city." I held up my third finger. "Thirdly, I signed us both up for boxing classes in 4 weeks. You and I will step into the ring, sign an injury liability agreement, and not leave it until we lose consciousness. And when you wake up, you're going to leave my wife alone anyway. Then you'll have to leave town." The waiter brought my scotch as soon as I finished. I took a deep sip and felt the sensation of fire. It's time to get calm back. "You must think I'm a fool. Why should I agree to one of these options?" He grinned. I showed him the grim grin I was hoping for. "Because you don't want to spend the rest of your life always afraid that I or one of my friends will waylay you. Whenever you walk to your car at night, you'll wonder if I or one of my buddies is somewhere nearby, ready to break your legs and crush your manhood with a baseball bat. Whenever you open the door, you won't know if I or my friends will break in, tie you up and behead you. Whenever you go to a bar, you will be afraid that I or my comrades will put something in your drink and subject you to cruel actions before they mutilate your manhood. You're not risking it. You're a coward. That's what your wife said when I fucked her last night." His face regained its color. I took another sip of whiskey, then took my phone out of my pocket and activated voice recording. I was hoping he would document our conversation. I really should have planned this evening better. "You were planning to drug my wife and attack her, you pervert. Are you ready to risk the rest of your life in agony and hoping that I won't do what I promised? It's time to catch up with him." The medicine was just to get her excited when my friends came. We planned to spend the night with her the way we wanted. My calm completely disappeared. I grabbed him by the collar with my left hand and pulled him towards me. Without hitting him hard with my right hand due to the sitting position, I heard a crunch and felt his nose break. He screamed, holding his nose, threatening to call the police. In response, I told him to go and call the police, calling him an idiot and expressing a desire for the authorities to analyze the remaining wine in my glass and listen to the recording of his confession. The police arrived 10 minutes later. It turned out that 2 officers were having lunch in the nearest subway. My statement was accepted. The remains of the wine and glass were collected for analysis. They searched Luke and found a bag of white powder. He asked for a lawyer and refused to speak further. They listened to my recording and seized my phone as evidence. It wasn't easy, but on the recording, Luke could be heard talking about some medications and a planned attack. It was almost 4 in the morning before Sharon and I left the police station. After her testimony, one of the officers praised me for almost 15 minutes and emphasized how I prevented her from being attacked. In the end, it was completely destroyed. Luke remained in custody. We used her phone to quickly inform my parents. They understood and promised to take care of Casey, deciding to take her to the zoo. Our car pulled into the garage, and we stopped starting the engine. We exchanged glances. She took off her seatbelt and hugged me tightly through the front panel. I let her cry on my shoulder for a minute before gently pulling her away. "Sharon, we still have a conversation, but it's late and we need to rest. Tomorrow we will both go to work and spend the day together to solve all the problems. How does this plan sound to you?" "Yes, Bob, it sounds great to go to bed," she replied softly. Then she added, "Can I sleep next to you?" "Of course, dear." The next morning, I woke up and snuggled even closer to her, remembering the events of the previous night. I dared to hope that everything could be fine. Okay, but I knew that we would have a few more conversations before making any decisions. My hand was on her stomach, and she put it to her chest. I felt a wave of emotions, but I knew that I needed to slow down. Getting up in bed, I playfully slapped her flawless ass. "Get up, let's go for a walk." "I don't want to have serious conversations on an empty stomach," I suggested. As a result, we finally ended up together in the shower, which only accelerated our morning routine. Despite the temptation, I wasn't ready to end up in bed until we figured out our problems. We enjoyed breakfast at the International Pancake House, talking about Casey and how she was going to have fun with my parents soon. We were able to keep the conversation light and joyful. After finishing the last cup of coffee, we paid the bill and returned home, sat down at the kitchen table face to face with each other. "Okay, I think I'll start," I said. "You can see for yourself what kind of person Luke is, so I won't focus on that. He claimed that you satisfied him and called me Mishka after sleeping with him a few days ago. It's true. No, the worst thing I've ever encountered with him was a terrible night at the Red Horse. I am aware of the seriousness of my actions, but I have never gone beyond that," she replied. "How can I believe you? You lied about dating him last night, and you lied and withheld details about that incident at the bar. And also your relationship with him in general," I said, feeling that it was time to be open. "I've been thinking about it, and I have a suggestion," I continued. "What about the polygraph test?" she asked. "Do you mean the false detector test?" I clarified. She nodded. "Yes, sign me up for it. Ask me anything you want. Just tell me the time and place." Her sincere expression was amazing. "I understand that these tests are not simple proof, but I would feel much better if you continued to tell the truth. I'll see what can be arranged. It may take some time, but it's worth considering," I replied. "In fact, it may take longer than expected," I added. She smiled. "This is a good starting point. We can go back to what role you had to play later, but my next question, I guess, will be the most difficult. He hurts the most and has the most weight in our relationship. How do we move on? The episode with the underpants confused you, and I understand that. I don't like it, but I understand. It's hard for me to come to terms with the fact that you approached another guy without telling me about it. But if you thought it was just a platonic friendship, I can understand. But what upset me to the core and made me think about breaking up was when you said you were dating other girls. I know I had tears in my eyes, but I felt powerless. Bob, all I can do is explain what I was thinking at the time. First of all, I want to apologize to you for all the lies. When you started this project for the first time since we met, it seemed to me that I was not a priority for you. I don't blame you or your job. I understand why you took on this and how important it is to you. I'm just expressing my feelings. I started to feel depressed, and then my sister Vicky said something that stuck in my mind. She suggested looking for romance elsewhere. I've never seen it as cheating on you. I realized that while you were busy with the project, I could have found what I needed elsewhere. And then Luke appeared. I didn't fully realize it, but he made me feel special. He was interested in my day, my family, my interests. Our conversations were mostly about me. She sighed, watching my reaction, which I was trying to hide. When Vicky bumped into me at lunch, I realized what I was doing. I used Luke to get what I felt I couldn't get from you, but I still wanted to solve the problems with you. In the evening, everything got out of control. I didn't invite him and his friends. They appeared earlier than my other friends. Luke bought drinks, including for me. As a result, I became more intoxicated than I've ever been with you. I've made some terrible mistakes that you know about. But then came an incredible evening that confused me even more. How could I just treat him like that, but at the same time have such wonderful moments with you? She got up to pour herself some water, drank half of it, and continued. Then a video appeared. I knew you'd be furious, with good reason. If you got drunk and kissed another woman, I'd be just as furious. And I knew it would be even worse, because after our passionate rapprochement, you would wonder if I was thinking about someone else. So I made another mistake. I tried to involve Luke to hide it. Maybe he encouraged it, and then convinced me to know. I felt an obligation to help him, and he wanted to take me out to dinner when my friends couldn't. I was lonely, and I thought you wouldn't come home until late. In a moment of weakness, I made a terrible choice, and I am very sorry. Our relationship has always been built on trust, and I broke it. Tears were streaming down her face, even though she wasn't crying. Oh my God, I said, getting up to hug her. I kissed her gently, then walked away. We are not at that stage yet, and it will take time. But if you're totally committed, so am I, Sharon, and I attended counseling for a while. Discussing my problems helped me deal with them. The important result for me was that, given that communication has been strong since our meeting, we continue to work on it. In addition, the consultant recommended that Sharon be tested for hormonal disorders. At 31, it seemed premature, but it turned out to be valuable. After several tests and a change of contraceptive medications, she felt better. Although we are not yet fully back to where we were, we are in a good place again. The polygraph test confirmed her honesty in all the difficult questions I asked. Although there are still doubts in my mind about the accuracy of these tests, I can accept this. I decided to sign up for boxing lessons, and Sharon became interested in the self-defense classes that were offered there. For her, Thursdays became evenings of self-defense. Sharon invited us to join martial arts classes, which she excels at, and I'm trying to keep up. Sparring has become our favorite form of preliminaries. The project was completed 6 weeks ahead of schedule and on budget. My company is now competing with the big players in government contracts. Although they wanted to promote me to vice president, I refused due to excessive travel requirements. Instead, I created a special projects department and head it. This brought me a new office and an assistant secretary. My new assistant has an amazing figure and a dazzling smile, and she perfectly meets my needs. So far, there have been no complaints that my wife and I are working together. As long as we bring in revenue, I doubt anyone will mind. The largest portion of the $38,000 received from my first project was spent on the Casey Educational Foundation. However, I had enough money for a week-long all-inclusive vacation with my wife. My parents have agreed to return my daughter when we return. I was charged with assault for hitting the hatch. Despite that, it was the busiest $300 and 40 hours of community service for me. Luke will serve 3 to 5 years for attempted pain and illegal possession of a controlled substance. The substance turned out to be gamma-hydroxybutyrate. Also, he was attacked while walking to his car in the evening, but it wasn't by me. As it turned out, the brother of one of his previous victims caught up with him. The attacker will serve 2 to 3 years for this attack. I put $50 each month into his prison account.
My name is Alex. I grew up in a broken family, raised by a controlling mom and her interfering sisters. Megan, the older sister, was 13 years older than me, and Anna was 10 years older. I guess I was an unplanned child, the culprit of my parents' separation. Dad left in 1977 when I was 5 years old and never came back. Throughout my childhood, I was plagued by bullying both at home and at school. All I wanted was a mother who would love me, a simple gesture of recognition that was never made. Despite the difficulties, I studied well, giving 12 years of my life to study. Time passed, and in 1993, I found myself at Kingston University in South London, grateful for the opportunity to leave home life. It was there that I met Holly, and I still remember her image clearly. She radiated beauty and confidence, while I remained shy and withdrawn. Holly was finishing her final year of creative writing, unlike me, who was aiming for a master's degree in mechanical engineering and design. As I mentioned, I was too timid to approach her while she was easily attracted to men. 165 centimeters tall with brown hair and mesmerizing brown eyes, she possessed a beauty that seemed unattainable to me. The men who tried to win her over were sociable and popular. To my surprise, one of Holly's friends started a conversation with me at a party, which eventually led to our acquaintance. Despite my limited experience with women, my modesty and shyness seemed to attract her. Having gathered enough courage, I asked her out on a date, and we started dating. I'm not ashamed to admit that she gave up my innocence, but after about 6 months, there were rumors about her affair with other men. I could not confirm these statements and did not dare to talk to her about this topic. Holly was a spoiled child, a client of her parents and her sister Caroline, which strained our relationship. I accepted her selfish behavior, her penchant for creating public scenes, which made me feel embarrassed. Despite my friend's insistence that I break off the relationship, I found myself in love, a feeling I had never experienced before. After graduation, we both found jobs and rented an apartment outside of Southampton in New Hampshire. We were attracted there by Holly's family ties, while I severed ties with my family a long time ago. We got married a year later, and the following year we welcomed Sophie into the world, and a couple of years later AITA appeared. Holly enjoyed motherhood, and everything between us seemed perfect. Over time, I have progressed in my career, eventually joining Walker Engineering 10 years ago. The increased salary and bonuses helped us save up for a nicer house. But like many during the economic downturn of 2008, it was a difficult year. Many people lost their jobs, and it became more difficult to win contracts, forcing us to work more hours without additional pay. It was during this period, when both girls went to full-time school, that I learned about Holly's cheating with one of her former classmates. Forgetting about work, I remained ignorant until it was too late. At first I was unsure about the identity of her lover, but Toby suspected a classmate who moved in next door. The confrontation with Holly turned out to be unsuccessful. She waved away my fears with laughter, despite the fact that I felt her deception. However, the stability of my job and income put me in a good position to purchase a beautiful home. Holly was constantly trying to persuade me to buy a house that reflected our status, whatever that meant. Despite my doubts, I agreed, and we purchased a beautiful 5-bedroom house in Southampton. There was a favorable market, so we were able to undermine it well, despite the slightly overpriced mortgage. However, I did one unusual thing for myself. I opened a new savings account in my own name only. I only contributed my share of the bonus there, and since I handled all the finance and banking operations as the sole breadwinner, I doubt Holly even knew about it, even if I showed her the checks. Looking back, it was one of the smartest things I could have done. I needed some security because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning to leave me if her ex came back. After this incident, everything seemed to be back to normal, and my daughters remained my top priority. I devoted myself to the education of my children and spent a lot of time with them on weekends, taking them to various activities such as dancing, concerts, and trips to the zoo. Holly always seemed too busy with her walks with Ivel and idle friends. I rarely interacted with other husbands, but we all seemed to be controlled in some way by our wives to varying degrees. My friends used to make fun of me by singing Under My Thumb by the Rolling Stones when I had to cancel plans because of Holly's wishes. Even at work, my colleagues made comments about my marital situation, especially about Holly's dominance over me. All this went on until a few months ago. Ava had just left for university, leaving Holly and me alone for the first time in 18 years. Both of our daughters went to study at our old alma mater. When I was helping Ava settle into a new apartment with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was still with her mother. I was stunned because Ava was always silent, just like her old man. I heard that she goes left with Henry Walker at work, Ava said, bursting into tears. It was news to me, but I wasn't shocked. For years, I could investigate her infidelities, but I refrained from doing so, fearing that it would destroy the family and make my daughters feel resentment towards her, like my sisters towards their father. I tolerated her infidelity because I couldn't bear to lose what we had created, even though I still loved her. This revelation caused me several effects. First, it showed me the depth of the daughters' dislike for their mother, much greater than I had imagined. Secondly, it awakened old feelings related to my upbringing and how they affected my weaknesses. Finally, I realized that I had become the object of gossip and ridicule at work, especially from Henry Walker, who, coincidentally, was the owner's nephew and the man who betrayed me. I felt hopelessly lost, unable to continue to endure this situation, especially now that my youngest daughter realized the bullying from Holly. I knew I had to confront her. My heart was racing as I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Holly to return. When she finally appeared, I was unable to speak again. She just looked at me with an air of indifference and contempt as she unpacked her bags. In the end, I mustered up the courage to speak. I asked Holly about the nature of her relationship with someone else. She replied that she would not call it an affair and insisted that it was not so significant. I felt a mixture of shock and disgust, waiting for her to explain how her actions could be justified. She expressed her admiration for me as a supportive and friendly husband, but acknowledged that there were certain needs that I could not meet. I was puzzled by her direct confession and asked if that meant she was cheating on me. Holly explained that this only concerns her body, not her heart or mind. Stunned by her audacious confession, I remained speechless. She mentioned reproachfully that she was researching relationships with young men. Startled, I raised my voice, asking about her actions. Holly warned me not to scream, and despite admitting that she was involved with 2 other men, she expected my silence. She threatened me with the choice of accepting her terms or risking her leaving for someone else. I was silent, hoping that she would notice the pain on my face. Trying to justify her actions, she claimed that such behavior is common among her friends and can even improve a marriage. I was outraged by her attempt to use the actions of her friends as a justification, considering it despicable and self-centered. Questioning by her action the suggestion of having another woman, she laughed at the suggestion, mocking my ability to communicate with other women. She confidently stated that our relationship would continue according to her rules, warning me not to spoil a good thing because of this. Actually, she was right. During our 22-year relationship, I have shown unwavering loyalty and agreement with her wishes. Now everyone knew that I had been betrayed, tarnishing my reputation among friends and colleagues. The next morning, I walked into my office and met Henry Walker, a man who is related to my wife. With a grin, he asked how Alex was doing, and his grin piqued my irritation. I decided to keep quiet. Next to the coffee machine, I heard some men laughing. Despite their amusement, I continued on my way, feeling naked. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, seemed to find my situation funny. Sitting at my desk, I reflected on the difficult start of the day, feeling ridiculous both at work and at home. Despite my efforts to focus, I continued to feel angry. I decided to study the history of my father, knowing only the place of his birth and his county at the age of 38 in 1977. Searching through Cambridgeshire family history sites, I found several potential matches. Inside the underwear, there was a small note that said, "Please return this to your wife." I was devastated. I sat at my desk and cried once again that day. Instead of blaming myself, I wanted to blame everyone else for my pain. I couldn't wait any longer. When Saturday arrived, I told Holly that I was going to visit a friend in London, and she seemed completely indifferent to my plans. I suspected that she would be unfaithful, so being away made it easier for her. The journey to Cambridge was stressful, and I ended up arriving at Rachel's house an hour later than expected. To my surprise, she greeted me with the warmest hug I had received in years, seemingly unaffected by the delay. I met her husband Greg and their children Grace and William. We dove into conversations about my father and our newfound family, and Rachel's kind and selfless nature was evident as she and Greg spoke passionately, often finishing each other's sentences. David and Lucy Price, my cousin and Rachel's brother, joined us, and we quickly bonded, exchanging stories and insights about our family. After lunch, we took a short trip, which gave me a chance to reflect. When we returned, David and I discussed our jobs and family lives, and for some reason I found myself confiding in my new cousins. They offered unwavering support and advised me not to tolerate my current situation. Leaving Cambridge, I felt a renewed perspective. Enduring countless lies and mistreatment, the kindness and honesty shown by my newfound family gave me hope. I realized that I needed to reclaim my own happiness, not just for myself, but also for my daughters, friends, and this new family. When I returned home at 8 p.m., I found Holly getting ready to go out. I asked her about her plans, and she casually mentioned that she was going out with her friends. I caught her off guard when I brought up her affair with Max. She pleaded with me to stop mentioning it, clearly indifferent to my feelings. I urged her to stop and be faithful to me as her husband. Dismissing my concerns, she assured me that she was and always would be my wife. She asked me not to deny her pleasures and promised to make life easy for me, insisting that she would be back by midnight. Ignoring my pleas, she continued to threaten and try to embrace me as I turned away. Unfazed, she grabbed her luxury handbag and headed towards the door. Asserting my role as her husband, I sternly asked her not to proceed with her plans. She paused, looking at me as if questioning my authority, and then burst into laughter. Mockingly, she asked what I would do, asserting that I would never have the courage to leave her, and predicting that I would always be there for her. Crestfallen, I lowered my head, realizing that I had been a fool for far too long, catering to her selfishness while neglecting my own needs. It was time to end the charade and make plans for change. I wasted no time in taking action. In fact, I began while she was out with Henry or Max, perhaps both of them together. That was likely what she meant by indulging in her desires and having it all. My thoughts fueled my anger, causing me to lose focus. I needed to find a way to sever any remaining affection I held for her, and I believed I had found a solution. I located the box that contained a specific picture of my mom and sisters, the only one I had. Though skeptical, I cut out a picture of Holly's face and pasted it next to them. With no love left for my own family, adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might just sever my emotional ties. I placed it on my study desk around 12:45 a.m. and completed the task. I had mostly planned my short-term goals, even though executing them might take a few weeks. Luckily, I had the luxury of time as Holly wasn't anticipating my departure. Though uncertain and in need of assistance, I had convinced myself by then to follow through. I heard someone entering clumsily through the door, and as I peeked out the window, I witnessed Henry Walker leaving. As I heard Holly ascending the stairs, I quickly cleared my browsing history, vowing to use incognito mode from then on. After she retired to our bedroom, I went downstairs to make some coffee. As I reflected on my future away from this toxic environment, even without my daughters, it became more and more tolerable. Deciding to relocate closer to my daughters come Monday morning, I went to work with a newfound resolution not to exert myself any longer. Unfazed by the snide remarks and laughter directed at me, I scheduled a bank meeting for 1 p.m., using the time before to carefully review my finances. Although it was risky, if successful, and with the right support, I could emerge from this situation relatively unscathed. The meeting went according to plan, allowing me to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. With a substantial sum in hand, I closed the savings account and withdrew the cash. On my way back to the office, I made a detour to a tech store, purchasing 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 TUF drive, and a new PC hard drive. Upon my return, I immediately began accessing the company's private customer files. It took me an hour to crack Jack's password. Ironically, it was his wife's name and his 6-digit birthday. With the necessary access obtained, I downloaded all the files onto my drive, along with my plans and designs for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system that would position the company for continued success. We produce pumps for various industries, including air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even the dairy industry. After clearing my computer history, which included all the plans and work I had done, I shut it down. I replaced the hard drive with a new one, packed everything into my bag, and reinstalled Windows. The rest of the day was spent conducting research on competitors, using my phone and browsing engineering jobs in the South London Surrey area on Monster before calling it a day. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner, I retreated to my study. I came across an interesting opportunity. A major competitor that had struggled during the financial downturn was seeking a mechanical engineer for basic design and shop floor management. While not exactly what I desired, it was close enough. Despite their offer of a lower salary by $10,000 compared to my current one, I promptly emailed them my CV. I also made sure to sleep in our marital bed that night to maintain appearances with Holly, although I pretended to be asleep when she entered. Her touch made me feel nauseous, but strangely I took some pleasure in reacting this way. I was becoming repulsed by her, and that would ultimately assist me in the long run. The next day, I received a surprised phone call from Robert Williams at Sutton Hydraulics. He couldn't believe that I was considering leaving Walker Engineering for his smaller firm. While he almost immediately offered me the job, I requested an interview the following day, which he agreed to. Another crucial piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, and things were progressing rapidly. Having ample time on my hands, I started researching flats in the area. Eventually, I found one that was just 15 minutes away from my daughter's place and only 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a viewing for the day after my interview with Robert Williams. After that, I informed Jack that I needed to visit my daughter in Kingston the next day to sign some papers, and he casually agreed. That night, I called my longtime friend Toby Brown and arranged to meet him and his wife Sarah the following evening after my interview and flat viewing. Toby and Sarah knew that something was on my mind, and they anxiously awaited my explanation. Prior to meeting them, I spoke to my daughters about the situation, and they were supportive and understanding. During the gathering with Toby and Sarah, I revealed the initial phase of my plans. Their surprise at my decision to fight back outweighed any shock over Holly's infidelity, which they saw as a common occurrence. Sarah inquired about my decision to leave Holly and offered me another cup of tea. I recounted the revelations from the meeting with my cousins, including my mother's expulsion of my father from the house and my sisters siding with her. I mentioned that my daughters were supporting me this time. Toby expressed concern and questioned if the discovery at the meeting had prompted me to stand up for myself. I clarified that it was during a visit to my father's grave when I noticed something on the stone that shocked me and led to my decision to leave. Both Toby and Sarah asked simultaneously about what I had seen on the memorial stone. I shared that it featured an image of a rose with the words, "In loving memory," followed by my father's birth date and age at passing, which just so happened to be the same as my current age. Toby and Sarah slightly recoiled, indicating their understanding. I explained that I faced a choice when confronted with moments that could lead to drinking or worse, as my grandmother believed. I made the decision not to follow in my father's footsteps and instead chose to fight back. Continuing on, I revealed that I could no longer sacrifice myself trying to be the perfect husband, enduring mistreatment and ridicule. I confessed to my friends, feeling vulnerable about how low I had sunk. Sarah offered her help and shared her plan to protect herself and get back at Holly. I smiled and nodded, appreciating Sarah's toughness despite previous suspicions of her affair. As I explained my financial strategy, I revealed that in 2008, I had established a separate savings account where I deposited all my bonuses and extra cash. Acquiring a mortgage only required my name, making it easier for me to apply a loan. I outlined Toby's role in transferring ownership of my house to a new company that he would create to settle the mortgage, transferring the deeds through the land registry. Toby voiced skepticism about the plan, but I assured him that Holly wouldn't have the means to contest it. I pointed out that her religious parents, upon discovering her infidelity, would prioritize their principles over supporting her. They both agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage, allowing me to delay payment. On the way home, I visited a local Land Rover dealership, where I arranged to exchange Holly's car for the latest model. We terminated the payment plan for the Range Rover Sport that she had, which benefited the dealership from reselling it. I assured the dealer that I would come back for an upgrade, knowing that he would be able to reimburse the cost of Holly's car by selling it almost as new. I apologized for the inconvenience, but explained that the prospect of selling me a new expensive Range Rover more than makes up for it. When I left, I took the brochure for 2016, but not for myself, but for Holly. When she got home, she was sitting in the living room, sipping coffee and looked pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag on the floor, preparing to carry out the second part of the plan. I expressed my love for Holly and wished her all the best. I stated that I would exchange her car and buy her a new 2017 model, pointing it out in the brochure. Expressing her enthusiasm, she exclaimed that she liked the new car, unaware of my plan. She acknowledged my ability to make her feel better by mentioning the only catch was that they already had a buyer for my car. She offered to take him to the dealership on Friday afternoon, leaving work early to complete an assignment. She offered to use her car for the weekend to go on a Friday afternoon, leaving work early to complete an assignment. She offered to use her car for the weekend to visit her lovers, which made her recoil at the last remark. An expression of shock and confusion appeared on her face. After asking what happened, I advised her to look into the situation. She didn't mention anything specific, but asked if I was still upset about our arrangement. I explained that this was not our agreement, but rather hers, stressing that I had no say in the matter. I asked if I had no choice but to accept it, hoping for an answer. She just nodded, looking like she had established her dominance, and I gave up. Despite the circumstances, she declared that she loved me, expressing sincere concern. I didn't say anything in response and went into the kitchen. My phone started ringing, so I headed to the back garden to answer the call. Toby confirmed that the money had been transferred. The next day, I was ready to leave. Without delay, I entered the bank and was shown into the office of a mortgage specialist. An hour later, the mortgage was paid and all my remaining accounts were closed. I went down a few doors and opened a new account at another bank. I was happy knowing that I wouldn't have to pay anything anymore unless Holly sued me. My smile disappeared. The next day, I contacted the land registry and filled out the relevant online application, with all the details about Toby and Sarah's new company. Within 10 minutes of submitting the application, I received a confirmation email saying it would take 3 to 5 days. As soon as everything is ready, I'll just hand over the documents to Toby, and he can register ownership of his company. That same day, I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was with him, as usual. He usually got his way on Fridays, and I think I interrupted their intimate relationship. She left us alone. After putting my resignation letter on his desk, he looked at me with a silly grin on his face. He asked about the document I was holding in my hands. I replied that this was my resignation, and expressed my conviction that it would be best to leave immediately, given the situation with our families. I assumed that he might not want me around for too long. He seemed stunned by the news. I boldly demanded that my P45 be ready by Monday, and stressed that it was not worth mentioning my departure to anyone Holly didn't know. He pleaded plaintively, insisting that they needed me. I objected, saying that obviously they needed his nephew more. I informed him that I would be back on Monday to pick up the last of my things. I imperceptibly pretended to drop the pin from my pocket and took the opportunity to take the digital recorder out of my sock. Having built a pin for him, I pressed record, and discreetly shoved it under the seat and into the wooden frame when I got to my feet. Concluding the conversation, I mentioned that I had things to do and left his office. At parting, I told him not to crawl back when he was penniless, assuming that the only thing keeping his cheating wife with him was his money. I smiled, knowing that it struck a chord. I turned and left his office. An hour later, I drove home, picked up Holly's car in the logbook, and left her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to give me a ride home, and I gratefully agreed. When I got home that evening, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew she was crying. I asked her what happened. Reluctantly, she told me that she had contracted gonorrhea. I laughed. Oh, was I laughing? She just glared at me. He offered to take medication to get back to normal, and the tension in the air became palpable. That night, for the first time in months, I slept well. The next morning, I slept in the guest room and felt refreshed. A good night's sleep has done wonders for me. I went into our bedroom and gently woke Holly up, explaining that I was giving her time to rest and recuperate. Holly expressed her belief that I found her disgusting, to which I remained silent. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she confessed that she had ruined everything. She confessed her love for me and expressed her desire for me to get better. At first, I felt sympathy for her, but she disappeared faster than expected. That surprised me. Then it dawned on me that I had lost all affection for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could love really fade away so quickly? Obviously it was, because I was done, and her situation didn't affect me in any way. I left the room. Without saying a word, I got into my car and drove away satisfied. That evening, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who hosted a dinner party attended by many friends and colleagues. When I got home late Sunday morning, I found Holly doing housework. When she entered the living room, she rushed to me and hugged me when she saw me. I just patted her on the back. Excited, I offered to arrange the delivery of a new car, offering to drop her off in the city so she could meet her sister, who could then take her to the dealership. I imagined her returning in a new Range Rover, and she smiled as she came up to me with open arms. Turning back to the kettle, I pretended not to notice her. Throughout the day, Holly showed excessive affection, making me feel uncomfortable. She persistently tried to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding excuses to leave. Before going to bed, I noticed that she was crying again. After wishing her a good night, she asked if I would sleep with her and expressed a desire to cuddle up and hear reassurances. Feeling nothing, I replied that this would not happen until she received all the explanations from the doctor. I firmly stated that she made her bed, to which she bitterly objected, stating that when she got better, she was sure she could find a man willing to go to bed with her, since she had a lot of lost time to make up for. I chuckled to myself. It took longer than expected, but it was not there, and the severity returned. All the regrets about Friday night have disappeared, leaving behind 21 years of resentment. In the past, I would have succumbed to her manipulations, but this time I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. It would be my last night in my house, and it would be in the guest room. I also felt relieved that she said these things. It erased any remaining doubts I might have had. When I looked at my fake photo of her and my sisters, all I felt was hatred for her. She was sweet only when she wanted something, and nasty when she didn't get it. I woke up early on Monday morning. Holly also got up early to make an appointment with the hairdresser at 8:30. So I took her to the city as planned. I left knowing that I might be seeing her for the last time. I was afraid it wouldn't happen, but I was determined to make it happen. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both of our contracts. When I stopped at the parking lot, I paid the fine with my card. They informed me that the phones would be working until 5 p.m., then I went to the office to pick up my P45. I entered the factory, where I was greeted by a gloomy atmosphere. Word of my departure seems to have spread, prompting a moment of startled stares from my colleagues. Unsure of the reason for their concern, I headed down the hall to my office, passing by the coffee maker where the usual company was gathered. Unsure if Max and Henry knew about their shared connection with my wife, they smiled at me while exchanging jokes with others. I greeted them with fake cheerfulness, saying good morning. They'd asked about my wife, prompting the usual laughter at a recurring joke that I didn't find funny. I replied that she was not doing well, explaining that one of them had given her an unpleasant surprise. I let them in stunned silence, and when I looked back, their jaws dropped, which led to a commotion before I headed upstairs. When she approached Olivia, she smiled slightly and lowered her head, perhaps showing that I now deserve some respect. He seemed pleased, and I hoped I brightened up his day. At 2 p.m., I was sitting and waiting for the call, found some paint thinner in the garage and poured it on the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fireplace, my phone rang. I answered calmly, and Holly's voice came on the line, demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant. Insisting that I shouldn't play dumb, she continued to question me. I asked her to calm down and asked what was going on. There was silence, and I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister's voice in the background. She mentioned that she was told that I didn't buy her a new car, but instead sold it. Teasingly, I mentioned that I might have forgotten to mention it. She panicked, asking what was going on. Remaining calm despite my pounding heart, I informed her that from now on, if she needed a car, she could pay for it herself. She screamed back, expressing confusion and disappointment. I repeated that she had heard me perfectly, and added that I needed to clean up the kitchen. She asked if it was some kind of stupid joke, to which I said nothing. She stated that we would talk about it when she returned home, expressing her displeasure at being played. I didn't say anything. I hung up the phone while she kept shouting my name. Outside, I struck a match and lit the funeral pyre. Our story burned to the ground when I left. Taking our marriage certificate out of my pocket, I tore it to shreds and left it on the kitchen table next to our only photo at Disneyland, capturing happier times. I wondered if she remembered those moments fondly too. I slipped into my car and drove away. As I approached the end of the street, I caught a glimpse of Holly and Jennifer in the rearview mirror, who ran into the house without even looking up. With a smile, I turned off the phone and drove on. By 4 p.m. I got to Sutton. Deciding that I had time, I went to the nearest phone store to sign a new mobile phone contract. Jack appeared at the door before I could knock. He said he had what I needed and told me to take it and get out. Perhaps this respect was just my imagination. When I entered his office, I sat down, discreetly putting the dictaphone in my pocket from under the chair. I knew he had a regular Friday night date with Olivia, and now I've recorded it. He snapped back, asking if I had another job. After ignoring him at first, I relented and replied that I had nothing planned. A grin played on his face, probably suggesting that I would crawl back. I asked about my salary for the last month and the bonus at the end of the year, to which he burst out laughing. Olivia came in with my P45, and when she asked what was funny, Jack explained that I had requested my bonus and salary, considering them rich. Olivia intervened, laughing with me. Deciding to join in, I responded with laughter, causing them to stop and stare at me in disbelief. Olivia asked why I was laughing, and I replied by asking her why she let the old man use her every week. My laughter intensified and they froze, Olivia's eyes widened, and Jack turned red with rage. In response to Jack's anger, he spat out, calling me a scoundrel and ordering me to get out of his office and his company before he ordered the guys to pull me out by the ears. Chuckling, I left, taking the last of my things from the office. Still chuckling to myself, I drove home, unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk and entered the house. As I looked around the rooms, I wondered what to take with me. I took out some of Romero Brito's works, wrapped them in plastic I found in the garage, and loaded them into my car. I went around the house collecting various things, then emptied my closet upstairs. I took out all my important documents from the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate. Using the ladder to the attic, I took out my old things, including my diploma and family photos. In the master bedroom, I collected all the jewelry that Holly had given me over the years, worth more than 10,000 pounds. I also took all the bags, shoes, and expensive coats that I bought. In fact, the entire wardrobe was my purchase, so I claimed it all. Considering that I keep careful records for insurance purposes, it would be beneficial to sell everything. When I finished packing, I realized that I would need a TV, so I brought it along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player. By this time, my car was full. I decided to throw away all of Holly's clothes and a few other unnecessary items, including some of my old clothes. A new me will need a new wardrobe, and the girls will be happy to help me. There was no particular rush, as Holly would not be back until after 2 p.m. I took a moment to drink a cup of tea. Be sure to call the TV company and turn off the satellite connection and the internet. I also contacted British Gas and Southern Water to cancel utility payments. It would have taken a few days, but I didn't care. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed, when I noticed something that gave me an idea that scared even me. Holly's wedding dress was at the top of the wardrobe in an old dusty box. She probably liked it more than I did. I took it off and found our wedding album among the box of photos on the bed. She grabbed the duvet cover, gathered everything, and headed to the garden. I piled everything up, including Holly's clothes and other things that I couldn't sell. I left her underwear untouched. I didn't want any reminders. I closed the car and checked the time. It wasn't until 13:45 that I called Robert Williams and told him that I would pick up my P45 later with the night shift so that I could start all over again tomorrow. He seemed pleased, and I hoped I'd brighten up his day. At 2 p.m., I was sitting and waiting for the call, found some paint thinner in the garage and poured it on the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fireplace, my phone rang. I answered calmly and Holly's voice came on the line, demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant. Insisting that I shouldn't play dumb, she continued to question me. I asked her to calm down and asked what was going on. There was silence, and I could hear her heavy breathing and what sounded like her sister's voice in the background. She mentioned that she was told that I didn't buy her a new car, but instead sold it. Teasingly, I mentioned that I might have forgotten to mention it. She panicked, asking what was going on. Remaining calm despite my pounding heart, I informed her that from now on, if she needed a car, she could pay for it herself. She screamed back, expressing confusion and disappointment. I repeated that she had heard me perfectly, and added that I needed to clean up the kitchen. She asked if it was some kind of stupid joke, to which I said nothing. She stated that we would talk about it when she returned home, expressing her displeasure at being played. I didn't say anything. I hung up the phone while she kept shouting my name. Outside, I struck a match and lit the funeral pyre. Our story burned to the ground when I left. Taking our marriage certificate out of my pocket, I tore it to shreds and left it on the kitchen table next to our only photo at Disneyland, capturing happier times. I wondered if she remembered those moments fondly too. I slipped into my car and drove away. As I approached the end of the street, I caught a glimpse of Holly and Jennifer in the rearview mirror, who ran into the house without even looking up. With a smile, I turned off the phone and drove on. By 4 p.m. I got to Sutton. Deciding that I had time, I went to the nearest phone store to sign a new mobile phone contract. In addition, I caught the administrators at work to sort out my P45 and met Freya, my new secretary, who, unlike Olivia, exuded professionalism despite her youth. Back in my empty apartment, I brewed a cup of tea using a kettle borrowed from home. I unpacked and ordered pizza for dinner. After checking my old phone, I found that it was disconnected. A smirk slid across my lips, knowing that Holly wasn't on the phone anymore either, giving the girls some respite before my inevitable contact. I spread my sleeping bag in the living room and waited for dinner. The furniture will be delivered over the weekend, but so far I've been enjoying the distance from Holly. Turning on my laptop, I looked through the records from Jack Walker's office revealing his affair with Olivia. After downloading the evidence, I made copies on USB drives, addressing them to Jack's wife Margaret and Olivia's boyfriend Peter. I planned to mail them the next day. Finally, I called my daughter Sophie to give her the latest news, warning her not to inform her mother of my whereabouts, which she has not yet done, given Holly's lack of communication facilities. Over the next week, I furnished my apartment and began to reorient clients from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Despite the fact that some were loyal to Jack, most preferred our offers, which led to Walker's losses. I expected Jack to discover the reason for the decline of his business, but remained indifferent. Since the utilities were turned off in my former home, Holly would have noticed my absence as she was struggling with bills. Toby initiated the process of selling the house, supported by Sarah's enthusiasm, and by the end of the week the property was decorated with signs. During this time, Ava contacted me, telling me about Holly's move to her parents' house, where they still disapproved of her infidelity. Holly was seething with rage towards me, which, oddly enough, gave me pleasure, although I knew that the saga was not over yet. Over the weekend, Toby and Sarah organized another successful dinner party, giving me a break from my escape plan. Sunday brought promising news. After just a week on the market, I received 2 serious offers worth £550,000, one of which I accepted immediately. In preparation for completion, I made ice cream for the girls in the investment, providing Toby with compensation and providing some cash for my safety. Protecting yourself remained a priority. As the week progressed, Toby's news that the sale could start quickly filled me with delight. I immediately contacted the relocation company, instructing them to clear my former house. Meanwhile, the girls contacted their mother, who reacted with increased anger and threats. After assuring the girls that the riots would end soon, I offered them comfort. On Tuesday morning, during a conversation with a new client who recently met with Jack Walker to discuss a possible contract extension, I learned about the plight of Walker Engineering. The client reported that due to significant project losses, the company had to lay off 50% of its staff. He also informed me of Mrs. Walker's decision to divorce Jack because of his infidelity. Despite this revelation, I felt no sympathy. My mind was busy calculating the commissions. Although I remained in the dark about the fate of Olivia and her boyfriend, I knew that he had received my gift. Whether Mrs. Walker got hers or not, The reason for their impending divorce was undoubtedly clear. I wondered what Mrs. Walker's friends and family would think of her affair with an older man. In recognition of my efforts, I was rewarded with a brand new Land Rover Discovery SE. Although I was going to treat myself in advance, Robert and the executives were so pleased with my work and the development of the company that they gave me a car along with a significant commission exceeding £30,000. Looking at my new car from the window of my office, I was stunned when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. I found out that the car belongs to Diana, Holly's mother. Anticipating the inevitable confrontation, I braced myself when my work phone rang. My secretary Freya informed me that there was a woman in the waiting room who claimed to be my wife. I told her to tell the woman that I had an appointment and that I would be down in an hour. 3 hours later, I looked out the window and saw that she was still waiting. Sighing, I decided to leave for the night, ready to meet her face to face if necessary or just drive past if she didn't notice me. I went out the side door and headed for my car. When I was about to get into the car, I heard the screeching of tires, and before I knew it, she blocked my way with her car. When she came out, she rushed at me with fury, obvious from her disheveled appearance. Clearly upset and wearing worn clothes that seemed to belong to her sister, her disheveled hair added to her mess. "You're a fucking idiot," she screamed, trying to hit me, but missed. Enraged, she demanded retribution. Urging her to calm down, I invited her to sit with me in the car. Surprised by the sight of the new car, she told me about her financial difficulties and begged me to come back. I informed her that because I couldn't meet her needs and didn't match her young lovers, I felt like an outsider in her life. Then she begged me to come home, expressing a desire to sort out the situation and forgive me. I couldn't believe my ears and asked if she was joking. She confirmed that she forgave me for ruining her things in her life. Doubting her forgiveness, I pointed out the open deception, disrespect, and her audacity to demand forgiveness. I firmly stated that I would never be with her again, and coldly suggested that she go to one of her lovers. She mentioned that her friends treated her differently now that they had broken up, and their husbands questioned their loyalty. While acknowledging some responsibility for her misfortunes, I still sympathized with her. She admitted that she faced the consequences of her actions, squandering a good life out of greed and disrespect. Despite that, I knew I had to move forward. She begged me to come back into her life, claiming that she had nothing left. She asked about her share of the house and mentioned the need for a divorce. I pointed out that she never once said she loved me, saying she just needed me, but I didn't need her. I told him that I had not paid the mortgage and lost the house, admitting to lying. Her reaction was shock, and I understood the purpose of her visit. When she announced my desire for a divorce, she desperately begged, claiming that she loved me. After more than 20 years of marriage, she pleaded, admitting a mistake and demanding severe punishment. I stressed that it was a huge, unforgivable mistake, firmly stating that I would never return to it. She screamed and begged, filling the car with her screams. After making the offer, I offered to break up completely and offered £30,000 in cash if she would agree. Her behavior changed and she became determined. She screamed, threatening to sue me for everything, claiming that I hadn't lost the house and was too smart for that. Admitting she was right, I found myself on the defensive. I began by stating firmly that she would not receive a penny from me. She came to meet me halfway, and I explained that I would fight with her for everything and even more. I claimed that she had no money and I would move my assets, so that it would be difficult for her to track them. I warned her that by the time her lawyer found something, the account would have wiped out any profits. I gave her a choice: take the money offered or face the consequences of the trial without interrupting eye contact. She angrily exclaimed, expressing love and accusing me of abuse. She continued by stating that thanks to her, our girls will thrive by contrasting their future strengths with her perceived flaws. I told her to take the money and get out of my life, and she spat back, agreeing to take the money and get a divorce. I replied that I would arrange it, and she got out of my car, slamming the door. A moment later, she sped out of the parking lot. The next day, I initiated the divorce process, citing adultery as the basis. A week later, I made an appointment with Holly at the girls' apartment. Despite the completed sale of my house, I postponed investing until the documents were signed. It was not easy to be polite in front of the girls. I handed Holly the cash, and she started signing the papers. After saying goodbye to the girls and wishing Holly luck, I got ready to leave. Holly suddenly burst into tears, although I felt it could have been more for the benefit of the girls. Sophie and Ava exchanged knowing glances. Ava mentioned that she would see me next weekend, referring to the Coldplay concert, which they were thrilled about. I returned to the room where Holly was still sobbing, unnoticed by the others. Suddenly, I realized what Ava meant when she talked about the concert. Sophie asked about our plans, and I mentioned that I had consulted with Amy and let them know within a week before I left. Ignoring Holly's screams as I left, I closed the door behind me. 10 days ago, I made a shocking discovery. My wife had been secretly recorded at a friend's bachelorette party alongside 2 male dancers. The footage had been captured by another woman at the party using her cell phone. Interestingly enough, this woman had confided in her boyfriend, who happened to know me. Despite not being close friends, we had some mutual acquaintances from high school. The girlfriend had urged her boyfriend to keep the video hidden and refrain from sharing it with anyone. And for years, they did just that. However, their relationship eventually came to an end, and the guy began casually showing the video to his friends, treating it as an entertaining story. It became a recurring topic at social gatherings and guys' nights out, solely for amusement. What struck me the most was that many of the women involved in the video were already in committed relationships at the time. I couldn't help but wonder if they had been mocking us, the unsuspecting men. Perhaps it was just my own insecurity talking, as the story had never reached me or my close friends. However, everything changed about a month ago when one of our mutual friends happened to have a conversation with this guy. Somehow the topic shifted to the infamous video, and he began joking about how his ex-girlfriend had recorded a wild scene at a bachelorette party. This included 2 dancers engaging with one of the women, who was my girlfriend at the time and now my wife. Evidently, this guy had trust issues in his relationship back then and closely monitored his girlfriend's activities. Consequently, she recorded everything as evidence of her innocence in case he ever suspected her of cheating. In her attempts to prove her purity, she involved her friends, including the woman with the camera. They all ventured into the dancer's dressing room, where my girlfriend took things further than just flirting and flashing. She engaged in a sexual encounter with both dancers, while her friends engaged in other acts. Meanwhile, the other woman filmed it all in secret. Around a month ago, our mutual friend became aware of this situation and felt compelled to confide in me. He wrestled with the decision because he knew my wife and I were happily married, and he had a close bond with both of us. He understood the depth of our love, especially as we were raising 2 young daughters together, aged 3 and 5. 11 days ago, on a Friday, he reached out to me, emphasizing the urgency of discussing something crucial. From his tone, I could sense that it was a substantial matter. I believed it could be related to his own challenges, as we had always supported each other throughout our years of friendship, which began in high school. The following day, we arranged to meet at a bar, and when I arrived, I noticed his anxious demeanor. It was clear that he was preoccupied with something concerning me rather than himself. Having grown up in a tough neighborhood, my reputation as a big guy at 6 feet 3 inches preceded me. I had some troubles with the law in the past, mostly related to my involvement with a certain group. However, those days were behind me now. While people regarded me as a natural leader, especially considering my protective nature in high school, my life had changed drastically. My aggression had diminished, and I had become more composed and mature, thanks to my marriage, children, and stable job as a union electrician. It had been over 8 years since I last found myself in any trouble. As I took a seat at the bar, I could sense that whatever he had to say was about me, judging by his body language. This made me apprehensive, so I turned to him, asking how he was doing and inquiring about what troubled him. That's when he revealed that what he was about to divulge could seriously impact my relationship with my wife. He felt it was crucial for me to know, rather than discovering it years later and realizing he had kept it from me. Honesty demanded that he share this information, and at that point, I felt he should just get it off his chest. And then he dropped the bombshell. A few weeks ago, while hanging out with friends, one of them had shown him a video from about 5 years ago. The video showed my wife with 2 dancers in the dressing room. When I heard about it, I couldn't believe it. Immediately, I was overwhelmed by emotions such as anger, embarrassment, and shame. I felt the urge to run into him, thinking it might be some kind of joke, but deep down I knew it was true. I distinctly remember the day my wife mentioned attending a bachelorette party for one of her friends 5 years ago. We had already been dating for about 7 months then, but we hadn't lived together yet. My girlfriend was from a traditional Irish Catholic family, and she was exceptionally beautiful. I really loved my wife, so my first reaction was to protect her honor and reputation. In the past, I might even have actively confronted my friend because he mentioned it. Maybe that's why he didn't tell me about it earlier, knowing my history of being prone to rage. I asked if my friend had a video recording, and he claimed that it was on his friend's phone. He said he had only seen part of the video, but it seemed suspiciously to me that he was lying, because usually people don't watch only part of such things. However, this detail no longer mattered. I realized that my friend had not brought me here to play a cruel joke on the topic of my wife's infidelity. It would be extremely risky with someone like me. So I asked him how I could contact the person with the video, and my friend said he could arrange something. I asked if I could get his phone number, and my friend came out to make a call. We went out together, and upon returning, he told me that the man had not replied, but had sent a message. My friend assured me that he would inform me as soon as he heard something new. Initially, I wanted to leave the bar and immediately call my wife, but my friend advised me to think before doing rash things. So I decided to stay at the bar and talk to a friend about my relationship with my wife, which had been great up to that point. I never expected her to be involved in something like this. The first year we met, she was in a bit of a wild mood, but I didn't realize how much. After the first year, she seemed to pull herself together and put this partying phase behind her. However, she changes when she drinks. When we started dating, she was still in that partying phase, but that's no excuse, because at that point, we were in a serious relationship when she attended that bachelorette party. Our attitude, like any other, had its positive and negative aspects. Alcohol problems were a problem at one stage, but she got over it, mainly because of our first daughter. While I was talking to a friend, he got a message from that guy, and he said he could give me his number. I immediately called him and asked if we could meet so that he could give me the video on a flash drive. He said he was out of town and would be back next week. I expressed my interest in getting a copy of the video and asked how much he wanted in return for deleting it from his phone or any other storage. I was hoping he would agree to remove it voluntarily, but he asked for $11,500. That was one of the reasons I never liked him. I managed to convince him to lower it to $11,000. There was no apparent reason for him to save this video. My wife and his ex-girlfriend are no longer in touch, and his ex-girlfriend probably won't hold it against him. I think he was just an evil person. However, I was glad he asked for the money because it allowed us to create a legal agreement prohibiting him from distributing the video to the public, leaving me the owner of the only copy. My goal was to protect not only the honor and reputation of my wife, but also my daughters and myself from further humiliation. The thought of a video of my wife circulating on the internet would be a significant embarrassment to my family. I wanted to control the situation as much as possible before dealing with my wife. Later, it was rumored that the video was too explicit, even for the imagination. That night, I was too drunk to drive, so I had to call a taxi and park the car in the parking lot of the bar. When I got home, I barely got through the door. What I remember is calling my wife on 403 and passing out. I wanted to confront her that night, but I was too drunk to handle it. The next morning, I woke up hungover on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. My wife, I think, was supposed to go to work that day, but she called because she was worried about my unusual behavior and wanted to find out what was going on. She handed me a glass of water while I was sitting there, and after taking a sip, she asked me what was bothering me. I looked at her, and all the memories of last night came back to me. I hadn't been so angry with my wife in a long time, and I needed answers. The images of her with those two dancers were all I could think of. When I looked at her, I just couldn't find the words to say. I started crying like a child. I couldn't remember the last time I cried, and it was one of the lowest moments of my life. My wife seemed puzzled and started crying too. She wanted to comfort me with a hug, but I pushed her away. At this point, she started to get annoyed and kept asking what was going on. Finally, I told her that a video appeared on the internet showing her participating with two dancers at a bachelorette party 5 years ago. Her expression was full of confusion, and then she started denying it, claiming it was fake. She insisted that it couldn't be true, but I reminded her what kind of bachelorette party it was and asked if she was there. She admitted that she was, but strongly denied cheating. She said it was all a lie, but I assumed that maybe she was intoxicated and couldn't remember what happened. She replied that if she was with two guys, she would definitely remember. She asked me to show her the video, and I replied that the person with the video was currently out of town. At that moment, I really wanted to believe her. She seemed genuinely sure it wasn't her. I thought maybe it was a hoax to extort $11,000 from me, but such an amount did not seem worthy of such a trick. I really wanted to see the video to make sure my wife was telling the truth. The man texted me that he would be back in town on Tuesday, and today is Sunday, so I was very worried. I couldn't stop thinking about this video. My wife started behaving strangely at home, doing something unnecessary, as if she felt guilty. She keeps asking if I'm okay, giving the impression that I'm crazy or that I just made up the whole story. Who could have come up with something like that? On Monday, I couldn't wait any longer. I told the man that we don't have to meet right away. I can send him $11,000 through the Cash App, and he can download the video using Dropbox. He said he didn't have enough space on Dropbox and couldn't delete anything to make room for the video, so I suggested he create another Dropbox account, which he did. By Monday evening, I had sent him $11,000 via the Cash App, and he sent me a link to the video. I opened the video and saw a group of women, including my wife's friends from those days, who were happily admiring the dancers' performances. Then I saw my wife touching the dancers and their private parts through their clothes. The video switched to the locker room, where my wife and 2 other women were kneeling preparing dancers. I rated about 5 guys, if you know what I mean. And then there was another part of the video where my wife was engaged in sexual acts while remaining clothed. The 2 dancers swapped places. The video was as explicit as I feared. It looked homemade and poorly made, but it was her without a doubt. Her voice was unmistakable. This personal moment, which I thought was just between us, turned out to be revealed to complete strangers. It seems that the dancers knew they were being filmed, but they didn't care. I'm not sure if my wife and her friends realized that they were being filmed, because they never admitted it. She was not forced to do anything. In some cases, she actively sought attention and even initiated. She was indulging in these guys she met that night. I just need to talk it out, because I've always believed that there are special moments shared by people I love, and it feels like my faith has shattered like a soap bubble in my face. It seriously affects my self-esteem, and the worst part is that I can't help but think that I've missed her in the past and I'm missing her now. In our current relationship, the fact that she is close to me is of great importance, especially after the birth of our second daughter. But she enthusiastically engaged in these affairs with complete strangers, without delaying herself. I just need to talk it out, because I've always believed that there are special moments shared by people I love, and it feels like my faith has shattered like a soap bubble in my face. It seriously affects my self-esteem, and the worst part is that I can't help but think that I've missed her in the past and I'm missing her now. In our current relationship, the fact that she is close to me is of great importance, especially after the birth of our second daughter. But she enthusiastically engaged in these affairs with complete strangers, without delaying herself. I wonder if there is anyone among you guys in a relationship who has experienced something like this, because it seems to me that this happens not only to me. My wife, before I saw this video, was almost perfect, a great mother to my 2 girls, takes care of me, and she's not lazy like most unfaithful wives. She's completely traditional now, although I probably wouldn't have said that about her when we first started dating, but she grew up with it. That's what makes it so hard to get away from it all. Regarding your question about protection, they used it, although it doesn't really matter, but they used protection, and she was so caught up in it that she probably wouldn't have noticed if she hadn't been there. I remember how insistently she insisted on using a condom when we first found intimacy, and it even earned her a little in my eyes then. This whole situation makes me wonder if maybe our relationship has been one big lie all this time. Maybe I don't really know who she is. Maybe she had other partners that I didn't even know about, because she could have sworn with her life that the person in the video wasn't her until I saw it. If I'd have just heard about the video and not seen it, I might have believed her. She was so convincing, and now I wonder what else I believe is not true. When she returned home in the evening, I connected the video to the TV so that she could clearly see that she was in the video. I admit I overdid it because I was furious at her. She clearly saw that it was her. I admit I overdid it because I was furious at her. I thought she would show at least some remorse or ask for forgiveness, but no, it was as if she had prepared excuses in advance. She even claimed that we weren't in an exclusive relationship at the time and even said that we weren't in a relationship at all. I replied, even if she was right that we weren't exclusive back then, but we both know she's lying. How is it okay to have intimacy with 2 men? The person she portrayed in front of me, and who she has been acting with since we met, is not the same as I saw in the video. She then changes her story again, claiming that she was drunk and that alcohol allowed them to take advantage of her. I pointed out that she was clearly a willing party, and there is no moment in the video when she resisted. She objected, saying that the video was faked and did not show the full picture. She also blamed alcohol, but she was a little tipsy, but still aware of everything. Her motor skills were normal, and she wasn't babbling. She kept lying and making excuses. I didn't want to argue with her, but it seemed like she was avoiding full responsibility. She got mad at me for bringing it up, and said it shouldn't matter because we were just friends with benefits back then, not in a serious relationship. She claimed it was the past and asked how I would feel if she held my past over me, claiming that she accepted me for who I am. She asked why I couldn't do the same for her. We had never had a violent relationship, and I hadn't even considered it, but the way she evaded responsibility made me come closer to it. I didn't want to wake my kids, and I couldn't stand being with her that night, so I decided to leave the house with a few things and went to my colleagues to cool off, because I didn't want to do something that I would regret later, especially considering that I was already on probation punishment. My wife kept calling me, asking me to come home, but I ignored her calls. I knew that I would have to face this situation sooner or later, but I was too angry to be around her. She sent me messages saying that I was not ready to forgive her for her past, comparing it to the fact that she forgave me for being in prison for almost a year, for threatening serious harm, and that I had a suspended sentence for 10 years, which held me back in life. I didn't go to college, but my wife went and works as a physical therapist. However, I earn more because I am a professional electrician in the union during the day and take on additional projects, usually in the evenings and after work, which is very profitable. I felt like our marriage had turned into a joke, and I wasn't sure who she really was. I'm not saying that I thought I was going to marry the perfect angel when I proposed to her. I knew that almost everyone has their own secrets, but this one seemed to be too many. I knew she had a past when we were dating, but I thought she was just like any other ordinary girl for fun. I remember asking her how many boyfriends she had and she said 5, which was obviously a lie because it was after the bachelorette party. I knew about 3 of her past boyfriends and 2 short affairs, so who knows how many more I didn't know. However, part of me believed that despite all this, we still had a good relationship. But another part of me wondered what other lies she had told me. At that moment, I was deeply confused and my life seemed to be falling apart. I couldn't stay with my friend for too long because I had electrical installation projects and deadlines to meet. My house also served as a storage and office for all my equipment, so I couldn't hide with my friend indefinitely. I needed to return home because I still had common obligations as a father and a deadline for fulfilling the contract. Thoughts of divorce or legal separation had not even occurred to me yet. I was still trying to absorb all the information. I felt deeply depressed, lost my appetite, and badly needed to meet someone. My father has been a constant support for me in times of trouble. However, during my younger years, I often disregarded his advice, which led to numerous issues. As I've grown older, I've come to appreciate his wisdom and started listening to him more. Given my situation, I decided to reach out to my father and confide in him. To my surprise, he hadn't expected my wife to possess certain traits, although he was aware of her troubled past, much like mine. My parents had grown fond of my wife because they believed she brought out the best in me and had a positive impact on my life. She had an uncanny ability to show them the side of her that she wanted them to see, and she excelled at it. While most people who knew her wouldn't perceive her as that kind of person, her close friends might have had a different insight. My father, who has been happily married to my mother for 36 years, possesses a wealth of wisdom when it comes to relationships. He mentioned that times had changed since women now have access to social media, which amplifies their interactions with men and their means of seeking validation beyond their local community. Unlike in the past, women can now capture attention from men all over the world through social media platforms. Diving deeper into the matter, I discovered more regarding my wife's interactions when I checked her social media accounts. However, I will discuss this aspect later. My father's advice revolved around my return home and becoming a stable presence in our household, particularly for the sake of our children. He suggested that I should listen to my wife in a non-judgmental manner to mitigate her defensive behavior, and if she were willing to put in the effort, consider the possibility of reconciliation. He emphasized the notion that the grass isn't always greener on the other side, pondering that if my wife could deceive me, who's to say the dynamics would differ with another woman? While acknowledging the difficulty of forgetting what had transpired, my father proposed that if forgiving her became too arduous, it might be time to explore alternative plans. After conversing with my father, I felt a newfound motivation to confront this challenging situation head-on upon returning home. Upon my arrival, when I was about to take my daughters to school, my wife expressed the desire to have a private conversation with me. I informed her that we could discuss it later that night, and it appeared as though she had been crying for quite some time. Frankly, I didn't feel much sympathy towards her as she had yet to admit any wrongdoing. Furthermore, I received a text from the acquaintance affirming that he had deleted the footage and no longer had it in his possession. Given the lack of verification, I had no choice but to take his word for it. I also informed him that I would be sending him some legal documents, as previously agreed upon. That evening, my wife was already at home when I arrived. I prepared myself for her to come clean and confess about her infidelity, ultimately admitting that she had deceived me and presented herself differently at the inception of our relationship. She was seated on the balcony upon my arrival, yet even as I looked at her, I couldn't help but perceive her as a stranger. The image I once had of her seemed to have shattered. I used to believe that I was the only one with a troubled past, but at least everyone knew about mine, and I was willing to take accountability for it. As I stepped inside, took a shower, and changed out of my work clothes, she greeted me upon seeing me. However, I refrained from responding. A few minutes later, I joined her on the balcony with a beer in hand, and an uncomfortable silence engulfed us. My plan was to allow her to speak and potentially uncover any other lies she might attempt to fabricate. It was evident that she anticipated me to begin interrogating her, yet instead, I opted to let the awkwardness linger between us. She initiated the conversation by apologizing for her infidelity, explaining that it occurred during a certain phase of her life. She mentioned that when we first began our relationship, she wasn't certain of its longevity and was still immersed in a partying phase where she engaged in activities she now regrets. Expressing remorse for her actions, she claimed to have remained faithful since then. However, I interrupted and inquired as to why she had been intimate with those men on the very same night she met them, while I had patiently waited for months for her to be close with me, despite her constant assertions of not being ready. In response, she argued that she wanted our first intimate experience to be special and meaningful, unlike her encounter with the dancers, which she stated held no significance for her. However, her explanation made no sense to me. I pointed out that she had willingly engaged in explicit acts with them on the first day, so why had I been made to wait for a supposed special occasion? It felt as though she used intimacy as a reward for me, while readily engaging with strangers explicitly in front of her friends. Additionally, I questioned her about the possibility of other affairs that weren't captured on tape. She adamantly insisted that there were none, but my disbelief was palpable. She suggested that I check her phone and social media, claiming that she was telling the truth. I noticed that if she had enough time to edit her story, then she had enough time to delete any evidence from her phone. Although I didn't expect to find anything on her phone, I still decided to take advantage of her offer. She gave me access to all her passwords after our conversation. Although I felt that she had admitted her guilt to some extent, I still believed that she was not hiding everything. Doubt arose, and I could no longer fully trust her. However, I decided to follow my father's advice and give our relationship another chance. That night, I couldn't afford to sleep in the same room with her, so I asked her to sleep in the guest room. The next day, I initially resisted the urge to check my wife's social media because I didn't expect to find anything. I assumed she might have cleaned everything, but she was hiding something. However, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it was hard for me to focus on my work. In the end, I gave up and logged into her social media accounts after reading all her messages. I started constantly monitoring her social media, and soon realized how unhealthy it was. She didn't post explicit content at the time, but I was surprised how many guys wrote to her. I noticed that she was deleting these messages to hide them from me, because I had notifications, and when I tried to read the message, it had already disappeared. I thought that maybe attracted women usually get this kind of attention, even those who don't post anything provocative. Most of the men writing to her were from the Middle East and South Asian countries, so there was nothing to fear in this regard. A week later, our relationship was still strained, even though we were at least talking. We were no longer close from the moment I found out about the betrayal, but my wife was trying to reconcile, and she was tired of my constant attitude. We talked, and she suggested going to a family psychologist because she couldn't stand my behavior anymore. I explained to her that this is something that I can't just let go of when talking to someone. I wasn't sure if our marriage could survive this betrayal, and my obsessive control of her social media and text sharing was having a negative effect on me, so I decided to stop, even though it made me feel even worse because it seemed like I couldn't trust her. I even started to feel like people were talking about me behind my back. One day I was at a local bar with friends and saw some acquaintances having fun with the guy I bought the video from. It seemed to me that they were looking at me and would turn away when they noticed. It seemed to me that they were laughing at me. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but because of the video, I couldn't help but feel like everyone was laughing at me behind my back. It was very discouraging, and I felt depressed, ashamed, and sometimes even angry. I felt disrespected, and the old me would have met with them and spoken my mind. They were grown men, behaving like little children, but probably some people never really grow up. Instead of running into them, I decided to leave the bar and return home earlier. It's been 2 weeks since that day, and during that time I haven't been close to my wife. I tried to give family therapy a chance because it was hard for me to get over it and get closer to my wife. Cheating was constantly on my mind. My wife scheduled some counseling sessions, and we found a babysitter to look after the kids while we went to the sessions. Before our first meeting, I was scared that the therapist was blaming me for everything, as I read on the site. However, this was not the case. The therapist politely but directly addressed my wife. I won't go into details, but it was like a thorough investigation to get my wife to be completely honest and restore trust in me. More truths have emerged, and my wife's reactions have made me think that there may be more such situations, although we may never know the whole truth. It seemed to me that my wife wasn't saying everything, and the therapist seemed to share my doubts. The therapist strongly recommended that we work on reconciliation and provided us with techniques to restore trust. However, I wasn't sure if reconciliation would work because my wife seemed to want to control the information I know. After the third consultation session, it seemed to my wife that she was losing interest because she felt constantly attacked. I was learning things about her that I didn't even know about, and the sessions began to reveal a side of her personality that she wasn't comfortable with. Even though she tried to convince me to switch therapists, I declined. She resorted to making excuses, like being consistently late and claiming she was too overwhelmed with work, in order to prevent us from attending our sessions. Occasionally, she would call beforehand to cancel without informing me. All of this led me to believe that she wasn't genuinely committed to taking responsibility for her actions. This occurred approximately 6 weeks after I discovered the affair. Eventually, I spoke to the friend who informed me about the video involving my wife. I inquired about how many people were aware of it. Surprisingly, he admitted to being one of the last to find out among his friends. Many individuals who attended our high school, as well as the majority of his friends, were already acquainted with the video. He mentioned that he stumbled upon it accidentally. I also questioned him about the individuals who had mocked me recently, and discovered they were also aware of the video. Therefore, I wasn't imagining things. It seemed like the majority of the men I came across in our town knew about the video, leaving me as the last one to find out. This was profoundly embarrassing for me. Upon returning home, I expressed to my wife how disturbed I was knowing that numerous people had watched the video, and that there was a possibility it might still be circulating. She proposed that we relocate to a different area, and she was willing to change jobs. It appeared as though she had considered moving prior to my knowledge of the video, which I had speculated. It seemed that she might have been ahead of me in regards to the rumors surrounding the video, and there was a chance she knew about it prior to my discovery. I thought reaching out to some friends who were featured in the video might be a good idea. Some of them were no longer friends with my wife, while others still remained but may not be candid with me out of loyalty to her. Additionally, some individuals who were not acquainted with her had already relocated. I attempted to contact them through Facebook, but none of them have responded thus far. It has now been 3 months since D-Day, and my wife and I ended up being intimate. She had deliberately tried to seduce me within our home, and one night I succumbed. It was more about desire and frustration rather than love, unlike before. For the first time since discovering the video, she stayed in our master bedroom. The following night, she attempted to initiate closeness again, but I was disinterested. Typically, I never refused closeness with my wife, so she became frustrated. She was prepared to engage in activities within the bedroom that I used to plead for, but I simply wasn't interested. She tried to cuddle with me, but it felt suffocating. I endured it for an additional night, but couldn't bear it any longer, resulting in me sleeping on the couch since it was the only way I could find rest. The next day, she expressed her distress at witnessing how much I was suffering over nothing and suggested giving me a hall pass for a year. However, I conveyed that this wouldn't change the fact that she wasn't the person I believed her to be. Being intimate with other women held no significance for me. I desired something more meaningful with someone I genuinely loved, but I no longer felt I could attain that from her. Approximately 4 months in, I called my father and confided in him, expressing my uncertainty about being able to forgive my wife and the consideration of legally separating from her. My father suggested that I spend a couple of months living elsewhere, thinking that some time apart might offer some clarity. When I arrived home that day, I informed my wife that I would be searching for another apartment nearby, so I could maintain regular contact with the children. She pleaded with me, but my decision was already finalized. Exactly 1 week later, I signed a month-to-month lease for a furnished studio apartment near our house. Throughout this time, doubts about the entire separation idea plagued me. I didn't want to be distant from my children or leave my wife. I genuinely attempted to remain, but I believed that a temporary break from my wife would be beneficial for my mental well-being. My intention was never to permanently move out, but rather to take some time for self-reflection, as I still possess keys to the house where I store my work tools and equipment. The night before I moved into my apartment, my wife and I engaged in a profound argument. She became extremely upset with me, claiming that she had given me space throughout the entire process. She believed I was acting irrationally, asserting that I had gone mad for leaving them over something that occurred when she wasn't even sure if we were in a committed relationship. I reminded her that we had conversed about this matter previously, and I believed there were still things she hadn't revealed. I required some time to gather my thoughts. She inquired about the duration of our separation, and I informed her that I would give it 2 months, considering that most of my belongings were still at the house. We agreed to work towards reconciliation. After moving into my studio apartment, I began to feel more at ease. The initial day was challenging due to my wife's profound disappointment in me. She even informed our 5-year-old daughter that I had abandoned them. Who would say such a thing to a 5-year-old child? When I arrived to take my daughter to kindergarten and my 2-year-old to daycare, my daughter informed me that Mommy had been crying. When she asked her why, my daughter was told that Daddy had abandoned them. I reassured my daughter that I hadn't abandoned them, as I am still here, taking them to school every day. After dropping them off, I called my wife to express my disappointment in her attempt to manipulate our children with lies about me. I pleaded with her not to involve them in our marital issues. However, she refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, firmly believing that I had indeed abandoned them. I reminded her that the only change was that I no longer live at home, but I have remained fully committed to my responsibilities as a father. The next day, I continued my routine of taking my children to school and daycare. They seemed content and happy. Afterward, I went to work and later headed straight to my client's job site to complete some additional projects. Once my work was done, I returned home to rest, following the same routine day after day. I purposely avoided social interactions to prevent encountering people who had witnessed the embarrassing video of my wife and to spare myself from further ridicule. I preferred to keep to myself. My wife and I occasionally discussed the possibility of relocating once we resolved our issues, but for now, I remained preoccupied with my commitments. Throughout the rest of the week, I did not see my wife face to face, but we maintained regular phone conversations. Most of our discussions revolved around coordinating our children's activities, and sometimes she would even drop off food at my apartment. It was a stress-free week devoid of arguments or children's demands. It felt like a temporary escape, almost like a vacation. I even entertained the idea of moving back into our house once this difficult period passed. However, I decided it was necessary to take some time away from my wife and children to clear my mind. Some of my friends occasionally engage in week-long hunting trips to places like Montana and Arkansas, and I have received an invitation to join them on one next month. In the past, I hesitated to participate due to my wife's objections, and I often conceded. Although the trip can be costly, my friend managed to secure a group discount for us. The hunting trip is still a month away, but I have already purchased my ticket. We will be traveling in my friend's RV, and I anticipate it will be an enjoyable experience. It gives me something to look forward to during these challenging times. The following couple of weeks followed a similar routine. However, in the middle of one week, my wife called me regarding a broken dishwasher, asking me to come and fix it. As I arrived at the house to repair it, I was taken aback by the visible changes in the living room. The only times I had visited the house recently were to pick up my kids in the driveway or grab my tools from the basement for side jobs. I usually use the basement entrance, bypassing the main living area. While repairing the dishwasher, I noticed that my wife had redecorated the living room. She had changed the curtains and purchased a new couch. I couldn't help but ask her about these changes, and she explained that she simply wanted to make some improvements. After completing the dishwasher repair, I took the opportunity to retrieve some of my belongings from the master bedroom. To my surprise, my wife had bought many new outfits. When I inquired about it, she mentioned her recent visits to the gym in an effort to stay fit and work on self-improvement. I couldn't help but feel somewhat envious that she was putting in so much effort to better herself. I couldn't help but wonder if all these renovations were her way of moving on. As for me, I couldn't shake the doubt about whether leaving the house was the right decision, despite knowing it was necessary for my own peace of mind. Approximately 2 weeks later, as the weather grew colder, my wife informed me about a problem with the furnace. I went over to fix it and noticed more changes in the house. Since repairing the dishwasher, I hadn't seen my wife up close. She was always in baggy pajamas when waiting with our daughters in the driveway, making it difficult to notice any physical changes. When I mentioned her weight loss, she attributed it to her month of self-improvement. We engaged in conversation, and I sensed that she wasn't as eager for me to return. Perhaps she had truly moved on and didn't care whether I came back or not. That was the impression I got from her. She still viewed me as the handyman, taking care of the children and contributing financially. I continued to fulfill my share of the mortgage, and she enjoyed having the convenience of a man around without the obligations of cooking or being intimate with me. It seemed like she was enjoying the best of both worlds. When I informed my wife about the upcoming hunting trip to Montana, I expected her to express concerns or object due to potential dangers and expenses. Yet she didn't voice any objections, ask questions, or show any resistance. Surprisingly, she was easy to talk to, which left me feeling uneasy. I began to believe that she had truly moved on and didn't consider my return a significant matter. This is the impression I got from her, and she didn't care if I came back or not. And again, this is the impression I got from her. 2 weeks later, I went hunting with friends, returned a week later, and took my daughters to school on Monday. When they arrived at the house and opened the car door for their daughters, they seemed happy to see me. However, my 5-year-old daughter asked if they would get a new dad, which seemed like a strange question to me. I reassured her that I wasn't going anywhere and asked her why she thought they were getting a new dad. She said there was a guy who stayed in the house while I was gone. Initially, I thought that my daughter might make a mistake and mistake him for my brother-in-law, who used to stay with us. However, my daughter knows my brother-in-law well enough not to confuse him with someone else. I even asked if she was referring to Uncle Jamie, but she insisted that the man's name was Jacob, a name I had never heard before. I couldn't access my wife's social media or text messages because she changed the passwords when I moved out. The name Jacob occupied all my thoughts throughout the day, trying to remember if my wife had mentioned him before my hunt. I noticed that my wife was no longer so enthusiastic about reconciliation. She just wanted me to be there to fix everything. I began to assume the worst-case scenario, that what my daughter said was true, and my wife had a romantic relationship with a man named Jacob. I thought that if I was insecure about Jacob, it would allow my wife to deny his existence, just as she denied anything happening on the video, gaslighting me. So I decided to visit her that evening while my children were sleeping. I wanted to surprise her by showing up unexpectedly, but she didn't seem surprised, perhaps because she was expecting me because of my recent trips. Our attitude remained correct, although I felt that the idea of reconciliation was losing its force. We still thought we should reconcile. I had the keys to the house, so I set off on my own. When she saw me, she asked if I was hungry, but I refused, expressing a desire to talk. We sat down in the living room, and I immediately confronted her with what I knew about Jacob and why she cheated on me when we agreed to work on reconciliation. I watched her facial expressions carefully to understand her reaction. She nervously ran her fingers through her hair, a sign that she knew she was caught on the spot. Quickly, she raised her head and explained that Jacob was her employee. They had a close working relationship, and since I wasn't around, she called him to ask for help with household chores. I persistently asked further if this assistance extended to sharing a bed. She looked at me strangely, and in a raised voice, I demanded an answer. She admitted that they slept together twice, claiming that there was nothing else. I didn't believe her story about just 2 times. I knew there was a lot more to it. I asked her how long this relationship had lasted, and at first she tried to deflect the question by saying that if I hadn't left her and the children, this wouldn't have happened. I felt that she was evading the question, so I raised my voice again, urgently demanding that she answer. It was then that she admitted that they had been emotionally connected for over a year, and that it had recently become physical. I reminded her that I suspected something was unfair when we were in family counseling, which is why she wanted to stop them. The therapist shrewdly recognized her lies and wanted her to confess. Looking at it from the outside, I realized that maybe I had been deceived all this time. I should have realized that our relationship was built on a shaky foundation, because I didn't know who she really was. I wondered how long their affair had lasted. I've read enough about cheating to understand that a woman who has had several meetings at a bachelorette party will not be content with a simple, ordinary relationship like we had. I couldn't believe her statement that the physical betrayal only happened in my absence, and because I wasn't there. I felt there was something more to the story. I asked her how she thought we could move forward with reconciliation if she had been involved with this guy for who knows how many years. She didn't correct me, pointing out that there were clearly more than 2 times that she confessed to. She confessed to being unsure of her feelings for him when I calmly asked if she loved him. I noticed a slight hesitant pause in her manner. I got up from the couch and said it was time to stop playing games. I pointed out that a woman who had intimacy with 2 dancers and behaved that way in front of friends didn't do it just once. I expressed my relief that she was happy with this guy and stated that now I had grounds for officially breaking off the relationship. I acknowledged that we had a good time with our 2 beautiful daughters and offered to stop everything. I used to question the decision I made when I moved out, but now I am certain that I made the right choice by giving her the opportunity to make her own mistakes. If I had accepted her lies and manipulation all these years, I would have lived a life of ignorance. I owe some recognition to the marriage therapist who helped me see the truth. Although she didn't explicitly say that my wife was lying, I could read between the lines of her questions and understand the therapist's perspective. It was like a dishonest person recognizing another, and I was merely a student amidst them. In that moment, I realized my wife was skilled at concealing her actions. I still had a feeling that there was more to the story and that she was keeping something from me. When I got up from the couch to leave, she told me she still loved me, but I ignored her and walked away. That day, as I returned home, I felt upset knowing I wouldn't be able to see my children as often as I wanted. I understood that there was no turning back, but at the same time, I experienced a strange sense of relief, knowing that I had been proven right and that her true colors as a cheater had been exposed. It's unsettling how true that saying about cheaters is. I'm not a religious person, but that night, I slept well, feeling as if the universe was on my side. Throughout this experience, it seemed as though everything fell into place systematically, revealing the lie I had been living. Just think, if my friend hadn't told me about the video, all these events over the past few months wouldn't have occurred, enlightening me to the reality of who I've been living with for the past 6 years. The next day, I called my father to share everything I had just discovered, and he reassured me that I was handling things well. He told me not to blame myself because it wasn't my fault, and that everything happens for a reason, exposing what was once hidden. Right now, my main concern is the safety of my daughters. I need to know who the man my wife has introduced to them is. You probably heard stories about individuals who pursue relationships with single mothers and their daughters for harmful reasons, and I wouldn't forgive myself if something like that happened to my children. The following day, I picked up my children from school as usual. My wife called me to discuss our situation and mentioned that she still wanted to reconcile with me, promising to cut off contact with the other man. I reminded her that she had been in a relationship with him for years, so that wasn't the main issue anymore. For the first time, she challenged my belief that their relationship had been ongoing for years, claiming it only became physical recently when I left her and the children. I saw this as an obvious attempt to shift the blame, and I was not convinced. I pointed out that while we were working on reconciliation, she had engaged in a physical relationship and had even invited the man into our home. Instead of seeking revenge, I believe the right thing to do now is to get a divorce and focus on our daughters, because she had already given up on our relationship a long time ago. She responded by blaming me for leaving home and giving up, but I hung up the phone to avoid arguing with her. Despite her physical attractiveness, I knew she wouldn't struggle to find another man, possibly even a better one than me. I hoped she would find someone better for the sake of my daughters, as the worst-case scenario would be if she were having encounters with random men in my house, putting my daughters in danger. The next day, I contacted one of her former coworkers, whom she had worked with for 2 years at the hospital in her previous job. I called her unexpectedly and explained that I had recently suffered a work-related injury and needed a male physical therapist. I mentioned that my wife had recommended someone named Jacob and asked if she knew anything about him. I framed it this way because I knew she was familiar with their workplace. She replied that she didn't know any Jacob, and the only Jacob she was aware of had been one of my wife's former clients at their past job. I thanked her and ended the call. I realized that my question to her had been somewhat deceitful, and she might eventually inquire about it with my wife. Therefore, I decided to confront my wife about her obvious lie regarding Jacob being her coworker. I couldn't wait to discuss this with her face-to-face. Furthermore, there was no telling when her coworker might inform her about the strange call she received from me, her husband. Therefore, I took prompt action and called my wife to address the issue. I asked her why she lied to me about the identity of her romance partner, pointing out that Jacob had been her client for over 2 years, and she lied about it. I told her that it was my right to know that she did not bring strangers home and did not pose a potential danger to our daughters. She replied that Jacob was not a dangerous man. He was a widower and a businessman who owned several hotels in the area. She claimed that he was a clean and trustworthy man who she had known for many years, and he was her client when his wife tragically passed away. She mentioned that they had good chemistry, but because of her marriage, they couldn't achieve anything. However, when I left them, she decided to give it a try. Interestingly, she continued to try to shift the blame onto me while simultaneously admitting her own guilt in the same sentence. After my conversation with my wife's colleague, I strongly suspected that my wife had been in a physical relationship with one of her wealthier former clients for more than 2 years, and possibly more. I decided to make inquiries about him, and fortunately, he does not seem to have any criminal activity. I would be dishonest if I didn't admit that I was a little jealous because this man was more successful than me. However, I also realized the importance of revealing the truth about my wife continuing her secret affairs after the bachelorette party incident. It was important for me to start over. Some of you might suggest doing a DNA test for my daughters, but I don't think it's necessary because they look like me. In short, 2 months later we divorced, and I sold the house, dividing the proceeds. My wife moved in with her partner in the novel, who owns several properties, although his main place of residence is 50 meters away from us. I also moved to another city to start over. I found a better paying job and rented an apartment with enough space to store my work equipment. Despite the difficulties of adapting to a new field and signing contracts, I welcomed this opportunity. Although I miss taking my children to kindergarten every day, we share custody of my daughters and I can see them once every 2 weeks. Life after the divorce is not as bad as I thought, and the custody agreement gives me time to pursue my hobbies. I didn't dare to date because I was completely focused on work, and I don't foresee entering into a long-term relationship anytime soon.